Chapter 797. When Li Yunxin was still here, Taoist Qingshui could always feel the terrifying aura around him. For example, when a person was immersed in the air, no matter how hard he tried, it would be hard to get rid of the influence that would break down the guard in his heart. But now that he was gone, she was like a drowning person coming out of dehydration. After a short period of confusion, she finally regained her senses and emotions. What came next was a strong sense of shame. She actually asked him for help. She didn't use any coercion or force. She didn't even stand on equal footing with him, but asked for his help. This was definitely not her style, nor was it her character. However, Li Yunxin's aura affected her. Although it did not make her feel a strong and clear sense of fear, it made her mind unconsciously waver. It was like a commoner meeting the son of heaven in a brilliant golden palace. Even if his face was taut and his back was straight, the sense of reverence in his heart was unable to be erased, and he naturally couldn't help but lower his position. And that was why she asked him for help. Now that she was herself again, she finally realized this. At the same time, she also realized that her fear of the outside world, and the inexplicable feeling of wanting to stay here, was also abnormal. Li Yunxin said that he wouldn't set any restriction on her, but he must have added something. But she couldn't do anything about it. This kind of thought was rational. The feeling of fear of the outside world was emotional. This emotion was so strong that she couldn't fight against it, even if she clearly realized the truth. It was like a person who knew that it was safe to walk on a glass bridge, but she couldn't be completely free of fear. She could only sigh and think. Now that the Dragon Island was gone, and she had cultivated the netherworld body, Li Yunxin was generous, and cultivated her to the peak of the mystic realm. But she was still not Li Yunxin's opponent. But actually, she didn't want to compete with him anymore. She didn't want to kill him, because of personal grudges. There was no selfless grudge, and there was no knot in her heart that couldn't be solved. On the contrary, she knew that Li Yunxin was looking for the third way that Li Chunfeng was thinking of. But she did not tell him. She was glad that the deception had succeeded, because the third option depended on how much affection Li Yunxin had for the people in this world, and it depended on whether he was still human. When she watched Li Yunxin fight the demons alone with Li Chunfeng at the foot of Cloudy Mountain, and realized that he was not the chosen one, she knew that the third option that Li Chunfeng designed might work. She had finally found a necessary condition. So at the time she said he might save the world. But after that, he gradually calmed down and realized that leaving all the decision-making power to him might be extremely dangerous. Because he was not a saint, a moral saint. But now, he had become the Grand Supreme Heart Devil. Was this the will of the heavens? Taoist Clearwater sighed again. She did not know what heaven's will was. When Li Yunxin escaped from the restriction, he felt a gust of wind obstructing him for a moment. Other than that, he didn't feel anything strange. At this time, the inside of the restriction was already dark and hazy. Wisps of thick netherworld aura drifted down from the top of the sky like many terrifying tentacles. The thick tentacles split into countless thin branches, as if there was a huge monster that wanted to swallow the sea and sky. But when he exited the restriction and looked back, he could only see the blue sea and sky. The restriction hid that part of the world. If a mortal went out to sea to such a distance, it would be extremely difficult for him to detect the existence of the netherworld on the ground. Even if he drove the ship straight there, he would quickly find himself in the fog. When he got out of the fog, he would probably find that the ship was dozens of nautical miles away from here. He only took a glance and continued to fly. The vast ocean water quickly receded below him, and he crossed thousands of nautical miles in an instant. But suddenly, he heard a voice in his consciousness. It sounded like he was in a speeding car, and suddenly heard someone talking on the roadside. The voice quickly disappeared, but he stopped, looked down, and found that the person who spoke was on an isolated island far away. He stared at that person for a while, waved his sleeves and appeared on the island. "I heard that you were killed by the 10,000-year ancestor," Li Yunxin said. "Are you the only one alive now?" The person on the island was none other than Emperor Li. He was Emperor Li. This ghost emperor didn't look well. His figure was very faint, like a shadow. Some parts of his body even became completely transparent. as if he was about to disappear from the world. Li Yunxin was far away, and could only sense his aura. But now that he was close, he realized that there was another person under Emperor Li. It should be Emperor Ye's aura. Emperor Ye's figure was so faint that it was almost undetectable. In about an hour's time, it would completely disappear. But Emperor Li only said in a voice like a breeze, "Save me! Save me!" The two ghost emperors hid under a huge rock on the island like shadows. They were hiding from the sunlight. But even ordinary ghosts didn't fear sunlight. The sun would only make them feel extremely uncomfortable. They didn't need to be like the two ghost emperors, who feared sunlight like fire. This meant that they were really at the end of their road. They must have been badly hurt by the 10,000-year ancestor. Li Yunxin didn't save him as he wished. He stared at him for a while and said, "You are using it to prolong your life?" It was referring to Emperor Yi. While both were extremely weak, there was still a difference in strength. Emperor Li, who could barely speak, was above Emperor Ye's shadow. Li Yunxin could see that he was absorbing the power in Emperor Ye's body. Emperor Li rolled his eyes and stared at him. He said, "Save me. Save me." He was a ghost cultivator. He was formed from obsession. When a person was at death's door, while his mind was confused and his body was weak, at least he was still confused. That meant there were many thoughts intertwining, but he couldn't think clearly and rationally. However, when this ghost cultivator that was formed from obsession was on the verge of death, the only desire to live in his heart would dominate his mind. Other than saving me, he didn't know anything else. Li Yunxin thought about this and sighed. He raised his hand and injected a trace of the power of the netherworld into Emperor Li's body. This power conflicted with the power in the ghost emperor's body, but it still helped him recover some energy. Emperor Li opened his eyes wide and could finally think. "Li Yunxin, save me. That old demon." Li Yunxin interrupted him. "I know, but I can't save you. There are two reasons. First, we are not tied together. We are using each other. And I don't like the way you do things. Second, Emperor Yi is tied to me. Now I see you are using his life to prolong your life. Now that I have explained these two things clearly, you can leave." Before Emperor Li could say another word, Yi Futian waved his sleeves and dispersed the ghost emperor. Then he raised his hand and drew a talisman in the air. Then he used his finger to pick up the ghost shadow of Emperor Yi, which was so faint that it was almost invisible, into the talisman. In an instant, Emperor Yi, full of the netherworld qi, appeared in front of him. It happened too fast. Emperor Yi, who had escaped from death, was still in a daze. His thoughts were still on the moment when he was defeated by the 10,000-year-old ancestor. He said subconsciously, "Li Yun." However, he immediately sensed a powerful yet gentle power emanating from the other party's body. This power made him dumbfounded. His thoughts almost stopped. He heard Li Yunxin say, 3,000 li to the east, there is a land of the netherworld. Go there and wait for me. I'm leaving." As soon as he finished speaking, he really flew away. After a few breaths, he reappeared thousands of li away. He returned to the land this time to save Lu Gongzan and the 9th young master. He also wanted to settle some things. In the words of the cultivators in this world, it was the fruit of fate. When he first learned the Tao, he knew that there were celestials and the netherworld. He felt that the fruit of fate might be real. It was something that he couldn't explain clearly. It was something related to the next life and past life. It was very mysterious. But later on, he slowly understood the secrets of the celestials and the netherworld. He felt that the fruit of fate might be used to deceive people. For example, when the audience watched a magic show, if they didn't know the inside story, they would have all sorts of mysterious associations. Some people would even think, maybe it wasn't just a magic show? But once they knew the inside story and the details of the mechanisms, the mystery would fade, and their thoughts would return to reason. Before he became Grand Supreme, Li Yunxin belonged to this category. At that time, he knew that the celestials were just ghosts left behind by the previous civilization. Black Bai Yanjun of the netherworld was just a celestial who had infiltrated underground. They also had to do things according to the laws of this world. They weren't omnipotent gods who could create the world or even the laws. But now that he was in the Grand Supreme realm, He sensed something else. People below the true realm could only use laws. At the profound realm, they could create laws. Now he knew that the so-called creation of the profound realm was just discovery. In his eyes, the laws of this world were very similar to the universe of consciousness in his mind. Countless laws could be abstracted into countless streams of laws. They traveled back and forth in this world, and formed the foundation of this world. Just like how there were some streams of consciousness that played a major role in the human consciousness. Some major laws were above all laws, and maintained the basic appearance of this world. Most of them were hidden in various places, and rarely came into use. But Li Yunqin felt that the reason these laws didn't work was because they lacked a certain condition. For example, according to Xie Sheng, many phenomena could only be observed under certain conditions. For example, in his own world, some physical phenomena could only be observed in extremely high-energy environments. In real life, it was almost impossible to see. But this didn't mean they didn't exist. Those at the profound realm discovered them, and used some kind of divine ability to create the conditions for them to appear. The cultivators below the Grand Supreme were all in this river of laws. They couldn't see the whole picture, and those who cultivated to the Grand Supreme could slightly raise their vision and see a part of this river. But it was only a part, and not the whole picture. Even so, Li Yunqin felt something else. For example, the fruit of fate, or fate. This was something that was very difficult to describe with words. It was very much like a normal person's intuition. Li Yunqin knew that this so-called intuition actually came from observation of some details in life. It wasn't something profound. Intuition could be explained, but the fruit of fate, or fate, he felt was something completely different. If it was compared to a river, those who cultivated to the Grand Supreme Realm would be able to see where the river was flowing to. Everything in the world was in this river. If they knew where it was going, they would know what might happen in the future. Maybe at some turn or turbulence, one thing or person would collide with another and produce a new result. This was the fruit of fate or fate. But this was just an example. What Li Yunqin saw was 1,000 times more complicated than this. There were too many factors that affected it, and the flow was not simply down or up. Its flow was random and chaotic at the level of time or space. He could see the present at most, but he was far from being able to predict the future. This made him realize that it was a wise choice to consciously cut off part of it, when it was impossible to know whether the entanglement between two people would lead to good or bad results in the future. Perhaps it was because some of the strongest people in the world had peeped into this secret, that the saying fruit of fate had been passed down. Because of this, all the cultivators in the world wanted to cut off something. He didn't pay much attention to this before, but now he realized its importance. This time he went to the land to cut off some fruit of fate and show off. There was an old saying, "Don't show off when you have a cat, just like walking in the night with clothes on." This was an irrefutable truth. He walked for another hour and finally approached the coast. A few months ago, he went out to sea with Liu Baishui and the others. When he returned a few months later, he found that Whitewater Town had become a wasteland. This was to be expected. The tsunamis caused by the successive battles in the sea had destroyed many coastal towns. Because of its unique geographical location, the Whitewater Town had temporarily avoided the catastrophe. But then he fought with the monsters in the sea, and the ancestor of the 10,000 years. The power generated by this fierce battle was not comparable to any tsunami. The hundreds of meters deep ocean water was completely dispersed several times, exposing the bottom of the sea. The disaster caused by this could not be resisted by the superior geographical location. When Li Yunqin arrived, there were still angry waves on the sea. In his eyes, the seaside had now advanced dozens of miles to the land. The former Whitewater Town should have been submerged under the water. He was stunned in the air for a while, and then waved his sleeves. The endless water line that seemed to stretch to the horizon retreated in an instant. Chapter 798. He landed on the ground. There was originally some shallow water on the ground. The higher ground was also very muddy, but the moment his feet touched the ground, the land he touched immediately became dry. Soon, The remaining seawater on the ground as far as his eyes could see also receded. He exhaled lightly, drew something in the air casually, and walked forward. Thus, the verdant grass and trees grew rapidly beside him as he walked, and spread into the distance. Li Yunxin mumbled, "That's amazing." He was not boasting about his methods, but the netherworld aura in his body. The netherworld aura did not look good. It looked like rolling black fog, overbearing and fierce. Anyone who came into contact with this thing for the first time would feel that it was a very strange thing. And the existence born from this aura, whether it was the 10,000-year-old ancestor or those skeletons, once it appeared, it meant destruction and chaos. But now that he had reached the advanced realm, he realized that in this aura, there was actually an endless vitality. This made him think of the 10,000-year-old ancestor's tree-shaped appearance, and the appearance of the three people under Gongdi when they finally merged. No matter when trees meant vitality, was the final appearance of the two people also due to this vitality? Now that he had touched a little bit of this vitality, he casually displayed it. Unexpectedly, it was a situation of spring returning to the earth. It was really wonderful, very mystical. He was currently walking in the northwest direction, because the spirits of Lu Gongzan and the ninth young master should be there. Before they died, they were both dragon son, and the dragon spirits were not destroyed. Once their physical bodies were destroyed, they would instantly escape far away and attach themselves to the body of the dragon son who was closest to them. But now, he was neither the dragon spirit nor the body of the dragon son. His life was intertwined with that of the great sage, so he should belong to this world's unique species. Thus, the dragon spirit could not attach itself to his body. Before he sealed his consciousness, he did not think about these things in detail. He only vaguely felt that by doing this, he would have a great chance of winning. It should be his subconscious, or premonition at work. Now it seemed that his premonition was correct. After killing the two dragon son, old Lu and the ninth young master should be fine. Even if he didn't care whether their spirits would be captured by the 10,000-year ancestor or not. Because the moment they died, the dragon soul had already left. The closest land dragon son to the East Sea was the fourth, Lu Juanpu prison. During the battle of myriad demons at the foot of Cloudy Mountain, number 4 should have been present as well, but Li Yunxin did not come into contact with him. He only knew that this Long Sun's territory was in the northwest of the Midland, from the Wayne River of the Luocha country in the west to the Chahan Mountain in the east. The territory was vast, but the population was sparse. As for the palace, he did not know where it was hidden. Although he was walking step by step, with every step he took, he traveled dozens of miles. With such speed, the surrounding scenery should have become illusory. However, he could see everything clearly, and would not miss a single detail. So he found that after walking out of the place that had been ravaged by the sea, there was still no sign of human habitation. Normally, when the coast was in trouble, the refugees should have gathered around here, and then moved inland with difficulty. However, now there were only collapsed houses, the embers of the fire, and broken armor. This generation had been hit by the flames of war, and the intensity was very high, and the scale was very large. It should be the result of Rong Jun's invasion, or rather the conquest. It seemed that the East Sea nation had been annexed by the Rong nation. He was a little surprised. In the past, when he helped Ingjuren for a while, he only felt that he was an interesting person and could be used. However, he did not expect that things would get out of hand, and he would actually help him become the world lord. If the territory conquered by Rong Jun could be defended, the territory of the Rong nation would be close to the territory of the Li nation at its peak. This meant that in more than half a year, the small Rong nation had expanded more than 100 times. As soon as this thought occurred to him, the forests, hills, and destroyed fields suddenly passed by him. Looking forward, he saw a city. There were gaps in the city wall, and there were also traces of smoke and fire on the wall. However, he could hear the bustling sounds of people in the city, although not all of them were laughter. He liked the life between the human world and the marketplace. But other than the time he spent with Lu Laodao in the city of Wei, he never had the time or the opportunity to experience it in detail. Now that he saw the city, he was stunned. But then he changed direction and went to the vast wilderness beside the city. Although the life of the marketplace was interesting, it was not something that could be enjoyed just by looking at flowers on horseback. Because it was interesting because of people. In the world, there was nothing more interesting than people. However, that meant a lot of time and energy. But he had more important things to do now. As soon as he entered the wilderness, he released his powerful chi and knew everything in the forest. He was looking for traces of demons. The demons had their own intelligence network, so he could find out where LV Junpu Lao's lair was by finding one person. However, there were much fewer demons now. The wilderness was extremely vast, and it took him a full hour to travel several hundred kilometers to the northwest before he found his target. At first he found people. They were a group of refugees in ragged clothes. Although they were separated by the dense forest, Li Yunqing could still hear them. Then he realized that they were speaking in the dialect of the Donghai Kingdom. When he listened carefully, the dialect was even more familiar. It was the accent of the Whitewater town. The accent of the people around the Whitewater town was mainly Chu, which sounded rough and bold, like it was mixed with the smell of the sea. There were about 30 to 40 people in this group. There were few strong men, but many old and weak women and children. What they were talking about was also worrying about their own future. It seemed that they were being driven by a powerful demon to go northwest. In this era where the Xianmen lost their virtue, the flames of war, and demons ran rampant, it was not unusual for a group of people to be caught by a demon. He had already heard about such a tragic situation from Lu Gongzan. But what interested him was that although this group of people was worried, they were not scared. If a demon wanted to catch them and make them into a human meat feast, it would not be like this. This group of people had demon aura. He captured this trace of demon aura and spread out his spiritual sense. Soon, he found the location of the demon who drove this group of people away. It was by the stream. It was a good-looking, white-faced scholar. He first washed his face with water and began to wash his feet. After washing his feet, he seemed to feel that he was not clean enough. So he took off his clothes and began to take a bath. Li Yunqing appeared by the stream with a thought. If a person like him wanted to restrain his breath, he could become one with heaven and earth. Therefore, even though he appeared only 3 steps away from the demon, he was not discovered for a moment. The demon was completely unaware that a Grand Supreme had appeared behind him. He was still happily scrubbing his back in the stream. He was humming a tune while scrubbing his back. And this tune was also familiar to Li Yunqing. The group of people who were caught had a Donghai accent, and the tune the demon was humming was a folk song of the Qing kingdom. He was a new Grand Supreme, so it was like he had gotten a new toy. Along the way, he tried all kinds of magical powers that could be used in this realm. Although he had not yet mastered all of them, he gradually got some clues. What he was most interested in was the fruit of fate, and fate, that he did not think much of before. Now that he saw this demon who loved cleanliness, he tried it on him. In fact, he was not sure what he wanted to see. He just wanted to try what he could see. But soon he found something. In the fruit of fate, or the river of fate, he found this demon. This was very mysterious. For example, this river originally did not have him. But the moment Li Yunqing thought about it, this demon gathered in and became an extremely inconspicuous small tributary, hidden under countless torrents. If Li Yunqing was not in the mysterious realm, and did not have the ability of the Grand Supreme Realm to slightly transcend this river and survey the whole situation, it would be difficult to find it through the hidden torrents. But now he easily stared at this small stream. This also made him realize that he had indeed missed a lot of things, because he did not cultivate systematically. Now that he was a Grand Supreme, he could use this method to see a person's future. But many people with lower cultivation levels than him could also do the same. This meant that the method of divination should have been passed down by the Grand Supreme experts in the past. At the beginning, they discovered what Li Yunqing had discovered. And then after a long period of trial and error, they concluded a certain method. Using this method, people with low cultivation levels could also use such a divine ability. The difference between the two was like how when Li Yunqing calculated what 9 nines equal to, He counted from 1 to 81 in an instant with his super strong brain power. Elementary school students with low cultivation levels would know 9 by 9, 81, as soon as they opened their mouths. However, as the saying went, one person can defeat 10 people with great strength. He did not need to care about those small tricks anymore. He was already standing on the high ground, and his powerful divine ability made up for any shortcomings in skills. He saw that this demon could be considered to have done a lot of evil. He was involved in every case of cannibalism and harming people. But at that time, he had just taken human form and lived in the forest. He had no one to teach him, and he did not know any etiquette. Almost all the cruel things he did were out of instinct. But later, he met a benefactor who enlightened him, and he slowly restrained his nature, becoming what he was today. Li Yunqing could only see him in this long river, but not the benefactor. If he wanted to include that person, he needed to know more detailed information. For example, skin, hair, birth date, etc. But that also meant that he would be involved with a third person. After learning about the existence of the River of Fate, he was much more careful about this kind of thing, so he did not continue to investigate. At least for now, he knew that this demon was not full of evil, and could live for the time being. So he asked, "Where are you taking those people?" It was originally a sunny day with a blazing sun, and they were by a stream in a secluded valley. Except for the sound of flowing water, birds and wind, there was no other sound. But suddenly, a second person's voice appeared. This made the white-clothed demon jump in fright, and he suddenly jumped high in the water. Just like a cat would suddenly show a fierce face when it was frightened. This demon was frightened, and actually showed his real body in the air. His originally good-looking face became protruding, and a sharp beak protruded. His naked body was suddenly covered with a layer of sparse white feathers, and the black skin underneath was vaguely visible. But he still maintained his human form, and did not show his full form. When he fell back into the water, he returned to his original appearance, took 3 steps back and shouted, "Who is it?" Li Yunqing smiled. "So it's a little black chicken." After he said this, the black chicken spirit was stunned. He stared at him for a while, and suddenly bowed his head. His face was buried in the stream, and when he spoke, bubbles came out. My lord, I have eyes but can't see. Have eyes but can't see." Suddenly hearing the word president come out of the mouth of a demon in the wilderness made Li Yunqing feel a sense of incongruity. But at the same time, she also felt a sense of intimacy. He raised his hand and took the demon to the shore, and asked with interest, "You call me Lord? Who taught you that?" The demon only dared to look up at him, and quickly buried his face again, and said tremblingly, "Brother Pheasant, ha ha ha." Li Yunqing nodded. "Oh, Pheasant. How is he now?" After the 9th young master left on the sea, Long Jiu also took Pheasant, who was getting along well with him. Later, little Jiu came back, and Pheasant stayed on the land, not wanting to hear his name here. But it was also normal. This place was not far from Donghai Kingdom, and if he went northwest, he would pass through Qing Kingdom, so it was reasonable for him to wander around here. Trembling with fear, the demon said, "Brother Shanji is in the kingdom of Qingqing. How do you know me?" He didn't want to waste time listening to the demon, so he flicked his fingers to help him. The chicken spirit's speech immediately became fluent. "I have seen Lord Pheasant's portrait. Brother Pheasant, let us see Lord Pheasant's portrait. So when I saw you today, I knew that such a handsome, elegant and distinguished person is exactly like Lord Pheasant. Who else in the world has such a face?" Li Yunqing thought for a while and said, "That makes sense. What are you going to do with these people?" The chicken spirit answered, "Lord Pheasant once said that I, the little demon protection, have to protect the little demons and the people in the world. Brother Pheasant saw the flames of war on the land, and many people have lost their homes. So he asked us to go to different places and gather the homeless people to the city of Wei. The city of Wei has been rebuilt?" Yes. The chicken spirit said, "Brother Pheasant and Lady Suyi are in the city." "Who is Lady Suyi?" The chicken spirit was stunned. I know there used to be a person called Qiao. Qiao. Li Yunqing let out a sigh. "Qiao Jiesin." Yes. Good. Then continue with your work." Li Yunxin said this and turned to leave, but the chicken spirit hurriedly kowtowed. Lord Pheasant, I have something to report. He paused. Speak. Here to the west there is a demon king. The chicken spirit hurriedly said. I want to bring people to pass by him, but he always refuses, saying that he wants to eat half of it. But his realm is extremely high. I can't beat him. Li Yunxin laughed. Extremely high, how high? The chicken spirit dared to raise his head. He is already in the real state. Li Yunxin laughed. Let's go. Bring me to meet this master. Chapter 799. The chicken spirit said, President, not only is the Monster King's cultivation level high, he also has a powerful artifact. I've made friends with 2 or 3 friends in the past few days. They are not the same as the Monster King. Should we ask them to come with us? Li Yunxin took a few glances at him. The chicken spirit didn't know why his president was looking at him. He lowered his head, feeling uneasy. Li Yunxin said, How many people are there in the little demon protectorate? What rank are you in it? The chicken spirit pondered to himself, wondering if he had offended this president with something he had said. However, he didn't know what went wrong. The demon king was in the true realm, and he did have a powerful Dharma treasure. His cultivation level was low, so the true realm was an unimaginable level for him. For example, a child looked up at the foot of a mountain and saw that the mountain was thousands of meters high. It was so majestic that it made people tremble. Who cares if it was 5,000 meters high or 8,000 meters high? They all look so majestic. Who would know the difference? Hearing Li Yunxin's question, the chicken spirit answered, I am just an errand boy. I only saw Brother Pheasant from afar and saw the president's face. I don't know how many people there are in the little demon protectorate. I also don't know what rank is there. So you are a soldier in the mortal army? Li Yunxin looked at him and said, A soldier who has just put down his hoe. If you don't know that there are sergeants, brigade commanders, and generals, you don't know the difference between the heavy cavalry of the Li Kingdom and the scouts of the Qin Kingdom. The series of terms made the chicken spirit's head spin. Since he had just transformed, his cultivation level was between the peak of the emptiness realm and the transcendent realm. Therefore, although he was smart, he wasn't the smartest. For a moment he was dumbfounded. After pondering for a while, he finally said, This lowly one thinks, maybe that whatever army is stronger. Li Yunxin laughed. It's fun to see more little things like you. Let's go. Tell your friends to save their energy. With that, he waved his sleeves and took the chicken spirit into the forest. About a dozen breaths later, he appeared in a valley. Li Yunxin used to like to play the game of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. For example, this little demon was asking him for help, thinking that the true realm demonic king's cultivation was high and his treasures were powerful, so it would be difficult for his guild leader to fight him. Humiliating the demon king and then killing him might sound melodramatic, but it was still a very satisfying thing. But now his cultivation level was the highest in the world. Although he wanted to play, he couldn't play with some powerful true realm Yao King. Very boring. For example, a plutocrat with enough wealth to influence the political situation of a country wouldn't go to some county's top 50 companies to seek a sense of superiority. Thus, when he landed in the valley, he put down the chicken spirit and looked around. It was winter. Although this area was in the south, and the vegetation in the forest was still lush, some of the trees that had lost their leaves were showing signs of decay. The valley was not big, and there was a cave at the end. There were bushes on both sides of the road, making it look very messy. There was a small path on the ground, as if it had been made by a beast. There were no demon soldiers patrolling, nor were there any sentries or arrow towers. It seemed that the true realm Yao King had just settled here not long ago, and hadn't formed a scale yet. It was really the most shabby Yao King's lair he had ever seen. But thinking about it carefully, it made sense. Back then, any demon with a bit of ambition would bring their demon soldiers to the Cloud Mountain to overthrow the Mystic Gate, and most of them died. Not many of the little demons survived, and only a few of the big demons escaped. Thus, it was rare to see the grand occasion of the big demon's lair being filled with little demons. It It was normal. This one could be considered to be extremely timid in the past. He didn't seek death and survived. In this chaotic world where demons and demons coexisted, he still hid deep in the mountains and extorted a few people to eat. He really didn't grow up. The moment he landed, he said, "The one inside, come out." The chicken spirit didn't know the air dance technique, and because it had been swept up by Li Yunxin, it suddenly heard a low roar coming from the cave. Then, a gust of wind surged out, and a white tiger jumped out of the cave. Behind the tiger, there were 4 gray wolves the size of calves. Behind the gray wolves, there were 10 or so red foxes the size of lambs. Li Yunxin's aura was hard to detect, but these beasts that had yet to develop intelligence were very alert. As soon as they jumped out of the cave, they immediately lay on the ground and trembled, knowing that there was an extremely terrifying existence not far away. However, they crouched in 2 rows like a guard of honor. Then the main character appeared, a brute wearing full armor, dragging a large blade out. The chicken spirit immediately became alert and said in a low voice, "Chairman, it's that treasure." Li Yunxin glanced at the blade. It was actually a normal saber used by the human world's army. However, this one should be used by some kind of elite soldier. It was especially large. The entire blade was black. Only the tip of the blade was shining. It was a faint gold color. If one looked closely, they would discover that the faint gold color seemed to be some kind of fragment that had been cast onto the blade. The entire blade was an ordinary item, but the fragment contained spirit energy and baleful aura. Li Yunxin glanced at the blade and smiled. He thought it was some kind of treasure. After the Battle of Cloud Mountain, he defeated the Tao Lord in front of the demons. During that time, he gave up some of the saints' treasures and casually threw away the broken armor. But to him, it was trash, but to the demons it was a treasure. At that time, whenever he scattered some, a group of demons would fight over it. The fragment on this true realm demon king's blade was one of the trash that he threw away. He didn't know what kind of weapon was broken, but the fragment was picked up and passed to him. It was so poor that it made one's heart ache. Seeing him smile, the demon king frowned. He wasn't the chicken spirit by Li Yunxin's side. He knew that although he couldn't see through Li Yunxin's cultivation, it made him feel slightly uneasy, as if he had an ominous feeling. He should be a strong cultivator. He stared at him for a while, then said in a low voice, "You black chicken, you found help? Where did this king come from? Are you trying to make peace or?" Li Yunxin interrupted him. He smiled, then turned to the black chicken spirit and said seriously, "You want to get rid of this scourge?" The chicken spirit was stunned. He looked at the demon king, then at Li Yunxin. After a while he said, "Yes." "Then beg me," said Li Yunxin. The chicken spirit was stunned again. "Ah." When the demon king heard Li Yunxin say, "Get rid of me," he knew that it wasn't a negotiation. Immediately he brandished his saber and shouted, "Friend, watch carefully. My treasure." Li Yunxin ignored him. He sighed, then said to the black chicken spirit, "If I want you to beg me, then beg me." Only then did the chicken spirit realize that his leader wasn't acting like a spoiled child. He didn't know what Li Yunxin meant, but he knew that a master had his own way of doing things. He hurriedly said, "Please, I beg you, leader, get rid of him." Li Yunxin smiled. "That's right. You're the one begging me to kill him, not the other way around. This ill-fated relationship has nothing to do with me." After saying so, the demon king raised his treasure in front of him. Then he suddenly pushed the treasure against his own neck. Even with his great strength, he couldn't resist such a terrifying force. To be more precise, his great strength was as weak as a breeze. The true realm demon's head fell to the ground. The demon king's soul immediately left his body, standing upright on top of the corpse that had just fallen. He didn't understand how he died. Li Yunxin ignored the chicken spirit, who was even more stunned than the newly born demon king's soul, and walked to the demon king's corpse. He raised his hand and caught the demon king's soul. Then he raised his hand and gave it 2 slaps. Only then did the demon king's soul regain its consciousness. It widened its eyes and shouted, "I." But with a flick of his finger, Li Yunxin lifted his own bloody head. He injected a bit of netherworld energy into it. helping it quickly become a ghost cultivator. Hold your head, Li Yunqin said kindly. Choose a direction and walk. If you meet any demon king, tell them that you were killed by Li Yunqin. Then, tell them that if they don't give face to the little demon, they won't give face to me. Walk all the way to the seaside, then head to the East Sea. If you're lucky enough to find a good place, you'll be able to live. If you're unlucky, once the netherworld energy in your body disperses, your soul will also dissipate. After saying this, he let go of the Demon King's soul. Get lost. Only then did the Demon King realize what had happened to him. He widened his eyes and shouted, "You're Li Yunqin? Aren't you dead? Where do you want me to go?" Although he didn't want to walk, his legs didn't listen to him, and he started walking quickly. One had to know that when one was refined into a ghost cultivator, one would have an obsession. Li Yunqin turned him into a ghost cultivator, but he didn't care what the Demon King's obsession was. He used his Grand Supreme Realm to forcefully inject a thought into this unlucky demon, to complete the task he had given him. This obsession was so strong that it was almost instinctive. It wasn't something that a Demon King's free will could resist. Rather than calling him a ghost cultivator, he was more like a puppet. In the blink of an eye, the Demon King hugged his head and disappeared into the wilderness. Li Yunqin turned to look at the chicken spirit. "I'm dead? Who said that?" The chicken spirit's face was pale as he stared at his leader. After a while he said, you. He still couldn't accept this. A towering mountain, a demon king in the true state, was killed in the blink of an eye. Li Yunqin walked over and patted his face. "Speak." The chicken spirit came back to his senses and stared at him. "A few days ago, some ghost soldiers said that they came from the sea. Said that some ancestor on the sea killed you." He immediately said, "But Brother Chicken said that was bullsh*t. It was bullsh*t, Li Yunqin said. "I'm leaving." The chicken spirit was stunned again. Originally, meeting his guild leader in the wilderness was already a very exciting thing. Now that he realized that his leader's divine sense had surpassed the limits of his imagination, he was even more excited. He thought that since he had gone through a life-and-death crisis with his leader, he might be able to get some help. Who would have thought that once the matter was over, the leader would say, "I'm leaving"? He felt a sense of loss. Seeing Li Yunqin's body tremble slightly, he felt a little expectant. He thought that the chicken spirit would say something to him. But in the blink of an eye, the figure in front of him had disappeared. Let's not talk about the disappointed chicken spirit. More than 10 days after Li Yunqin left the valley, many strange fellows suddenly appeared in the vast forests and wilderness in the north of Rome Kingdom. These fellows were all big monsters with cultivation above the transcendent state, or the true state. At least they were when they were alive. But now they had all become ghostly cultivators. They were either holding their own heads, or holding parts of their broken bodies, wandering around with a long face. Whenever they encountered a demon's lair, they would stay in front of the demon's door and start crying. The content was surprisingly similar. Everyone looked carefully. My head, arms, chest, and heart were all taken by Li Yunqin. He said that he didn't want to save face for the little monster, which means that he didn't want to save face. I hope that everyone can learn from me and not stand on the opposite side of the trend of history. Do more good deeds and don't be greedy for blood, so that the cave can be safe. Soon, the remaining fiendish demons in the wilderness and those who had taken over the cities realized that a malefic existence had returned. Some timid ones quickly closed their doors and hid. Some bold ones watched carefully, trying to find out where the malefic star had gone. But he had already left their territory. Most of the latter group quickly joined the tearful complaints. The world today was not the world of the past. In the past, demons lived in seclusion in the mountains, and people thought that it was just a rumor. The Midland was vast and sparsely populated, so the flow of information was not smooth. Even if there were demons doing evil in a certain place, it was hard for the news to spread. But in this year, the demons had reappeared and all the rumors had become true. There were even some demons in the army that fought in the south and the north. Most of these demons were called Sendo, or Heavenly Master, and they used their powers to interfere with the affairs of the human world. Most of them were evil monsters that occupied the cities, and occupied the cities to do evil. The armies of the human world had fought with them many times. And because they all had the help of the demons, there had been victories and defeats. But even though they couldn't completely eradicate the demons from the human world, the sense of doomsday that they felt when the demons first appeared had gradually faded. People started to deal with the demons like how they dealt with powerful beasts. They even set up wind watchers in various places to sneak into the forests and spy on the demons. Because of this, many demons were killed, and the rumor that Li Yunxin had returned to the land and was even more powerful than before gradually spread to the ears of the people. The Wind Watchers gathered information very quickly. They were sent to Rong City, the capital of the Rong Kingdom, at an even faster speed. When the former Black Knifing Juran, now Emperor Rong, saw the news, it was already 10 days after Li Yunxin left the Black Chicken Spirit. The thin paper that carried the news recorded the details of the investigation by many Wind Watchers. This included when a certain demon was slain, and when it appeared at a certain place. The description of Li Yunxin's appearance and tone were all listed. From this information, it could be inferred that Li Yunxin was heading north. If he didn't change his direction, he would reach the vicinity of Rong City in 2 or 3 days, which was about 100 miles away. But for a powerful demon with magical powers, it was indeed very close. Chapter 800. Ing Juran stared at the paper for a while without saying a word. He was in the back hall. There were 4 candles lit in the room, but it wasn't very bright. Although the back hall was called a hall, it could only be regarded as a slightly bigger room. In fact, it was part of the former yamen of Chengdu. It was rebuilt from the main hall. The Rong Kingdom had been established for less than a year. Although it had conquered the south and expanded its territory by nearly 100 times, it hadn't had time to build a new residence for the emperor. It could have used the palace in the former capital of the Yu Kingdom, but when the capital was attacked, the remaining army resisted stubbornly, and the war was extremely fierce. In the final battle, not only did both sides put in nearly 100,000 troops, but there were also cultivators and demons. With the help of theurgy practitioners, the losses were extremely difficult to control. Most of the capital was in ruins, and the palace was razed to the ground. The necromancer of Mu Nanju thought that there were too many dead souls in the capital, which was a sign of great danger, so he abandoned the capital and designated Chengdu as the place of prosperity. Fortunately, although the hall was small, it was extremely quiet. The middle-aged official standing in the darkness held his breath, not daring to let his breathing disturb the peace. He saw a faint shadow on Ing Juran's face. Although he knew it was the projection of the candle, he also felt that it should represent some kind of emotion in his master's heart. That Li Yunxin was coming. His Majesty probably wouldn't feel very happy, because even as a middle-aged official, he also didn't feel very happy. They were people. Many people in this world had been suppressed for too long. In the past there was the high and mighty Xianmen. The Xianmen controlled everything in the world, and even the emperor had to bow his head. Later, the Xianmen was destroyed, but there were demons rising together, and they still wanted to be above people. Now after a difficult war, the threat of the demons began to gradually fade, and it seemed that people could finally hold their heads up high. But this middle-aged official knew that there was still a shadow on this emperor. It was the ruler behind the scenes. This kind of thing, ordinary people didn't know much. Only a trusted subordinate like him knew a little about the details. His Majesty was originally a mountain bandit, but with the help of Li Yunxin, he embarked on the road of hegemony and began to fight for the world. Although Li Yunxin had never shown his face, his influence could not be erased. For example, the dragon cult in middle school. After the collapse of the profound gate, the sacred light on the cultivators faded. For a time, evil cults ran amok in the country, each claiming that they were the true mandate of heaven. They gathered many poor people who were discontented because of the chaos of war, and there was a faint sign of unrest. Fortunately, this trend was detected in time, and Rong Jun quickly suppressed those sections. Furthermore, he had decreed a law that forbade anyone from claiming to be a saint and causing trouble to the people. The dragon cult was an exception. The dragon cult worshipped the great sage Dragon King, Wei River Lord, who was one of Li Yunxin's incarnations. At the beginning of Rong Jun's rebellion, this cult had made great contributions. Many of the cult's Sendo followed the army into battle, and also recruited strange people with special abilities from all over the world to display all kinds of magical powers. Rong Jun was able to attack cities and uproot strongholds, because the Sendo could do many things that others could not. However, this middle-aged official knew that those so-called immortals were actually fiendish demons. The cult leader of the revered dragon cult in Rong Kingdom was also a demon. If His Majesty wanted to rule the world, he would soon have unparalleled power. But even so, he still had to bow his head to an existence that transcended the human world. Even though he was a crippled person, he still felt indignant when he thought about it. If Li Yunxin really came to Rong Kingdom, how should His Majesty welcome him? As the emperor? Or as a follower or a subordinate? These thoughts spun in his mind for a while. And then he heard the emperor in front of the table let out a light sigh. The official immediately raised his eyes and looked at him. How is the cleanup of the remnants of Munanju recently? The official thought carefully for a while in a very short time, and said softly, replying to Your Majesty. According to His Majesty's orders, arrest but not kill. So far, 340 suspects have been locked up. The number of people whose identities have been confirmed was 119. Some are still being interrogated. The Munanju rebels in the capital region have been eliminated, but there are still some people active in the northwest and southeast regions. But the war there is about to stop, and it is inevitable. Using half a year to search carefully, we will soon be able to pacify them. The official knew Munanju better than ordinary people. The people of Munanju had also made great contributions at the beginning of the uprising. They were even more outstanding than the Sendo of the dragon cult. They were ordinary people, but they were also the most terrifying spies and assassins. But later, it was said that Li Yunxin had a falling out with the owner of Munanju. His Majesty declared those people to be traitors, and began to purge and arrest them. But in consideration of their previous contributions, he only arrested them, and did not kill them. He felt that His Majesty did this because he could not bear to do it, but he had to follow Li Yunxin's will. This kind of thing really made him feel suffocated just thinking about it. Why is he asking this now? Is he going to give it to Li Yunxin when he comes? Let him deal with it. Let him know that the people of Rong Kingdom are loyal to him? But he did not expect His Majesty to ask another irrelevant question. Is there any progress on the immortal sealing technique? The official paused for a moment, then immediately answered. Recently, we found 4 cultivators from the previous Xianmen, but their realms are not high. I sent people to ask, but they said they have never heard of such a method. Ingjuren did not say anything. He stared at the piece of paper on the table in silence. The official's heart tightened. After thinking for a while, he said the words that had been hidden in his heart for a long time. Your Majesty, you want to say that it does not exist? Ingjuren said in a low voice, slowly putting his hands behind his back. The official took a deep breath. After all, it is only the words of barbarians. The barbarians he mentioned were the people of Luocha Kingdom. The people of Luocha Kingdom should be executed 100 times. 2 months ago, the Rong Kingdom destroyed the Tokarians. The Tokarians in Luocha Kingdom looked different from the people of the Central Plains. They had high noses and deep eyes, and the color of their hair was also very interesting. Their main business was business, which was not very common in the hinterland of the Central Plains. There were also many legends that were different from the people of the Central Plains. After conquering the Tokarians, the captured Tokarian royal family was escorted to the capital. Among them, there was a Tokarian prince who was proficient in the culture of the Central Plains, and was specially pardoned by His Majesty. He stayed in Rome City to be an editor, and was asked to write some strange stories about the countries in the western region, so that they could be included in the records of the 10,000 kingdoms. As a result, a legend written by that prince happened to appear in Ingjuren's sight, and attracted his great interest. The legend was, a long, long time ago, the Luocha kingdom also had a powerful emperor called Daedalus. This emperor liked to cultivate and wanted to become a cultivator. But just like now, not everyone had the talent for cultivation, so they could not cultivate. But he really wanted to obtain the power of an immortal, so he asked for help from a female necromancer. That female necromancer practiced a type of immortal sealing technique. She carved the talisman on the emperor's bones, which really gave him the power and supernatural power of an immortal. It was said that this matter happened a long time ago. At that time, the Midland was not as big as it was today. It was divided into two parts, the East and the West. Later, the immortals became angry because of this power, destroyed everything and rebuilt the world, which was why it looked like today. Ingjuren took this legend to heart. He was originally focused on the war, but after the war, he began to study this matter. It seemed that he also wanted to be like that emperor and obtain the same power. The commander was deeply worried about this. What he cared about was not the truth of the story, but His Majesty's pursuit of divine power. He knew that a person like His Majesty, after obtaining unparalleled power, would definitely want more. He wanted to completely erase the shadow on his head, but he could not cultivate. Even if he could cultivate, it would be difficult to compare with those cultivators who had cultivated for hundreds or thousands of years. He would not be willing to start over on the path of cultivation. He was already an emperor. How could he lower his head to others? That was why he wanted a shortcut. This shortcut, other than the method in the legend, there was actually another one. It was death. Then didn't the previous Emperor Li, Emperor Qing, and Emperor Yu all die? He died and became a powerful demon. If so, what would happen to the current foundation? Wasn't the powerful Li kingdom greatly weakened because of Emperor Li's death and the infighting among the princes? As a result, half of the kingdom was conquered by Rongjun. It was precisely because he thought of this that he said those words. This was a very risky thing to do. It should be known that Emperor Rong was not a good-tempered person, or rather, his temper was hard to understand. Even someone like him, who had served him day and night for more than half a year, often did not know what the emperor would do next. But Ingjuren did not get angry. Instead, he shook his head. You don't understand. Never mind, let's not talk about this. He raised his hand and pointed at the paper, as if thinking of something, then said, Go draft the edict. Prepare to welcome the leader of the dragon cult. Send orders to all armies, including those fighting outside, to stop for a day to worship the Wei River Dragon King. Then, tell the city to prepare for the ceremony, and ask the people of the dragon cult to open the altar. Then, cover the road from the 6 city gates to the palace with bricks and wash it clean. No one is allowed to step on it. Then, spread a red carpet, and cover the ground with fresh flowers. Aren't there cultivators? Ask them to think of a way to use fresh flowers. Set up a banquet in the city and distribute food for 3 days. Give each household cotton cloth from the palace treasury. Make sure everyone wears new clothes and smiles. The official memorized all these things in his heart and said, This is. Lu Gongzan said that he likes beautiful scenery and people. Ingjuren said, The people of Munanju also need to change into new clothes. Let him deal with them. The official sighed in his heart. Yes. On the same day, Li Yunxin appeared on a small mountain. In 10 days he had traveled thousands of li. The scenery around him had changed greatly. When he met the black chicken spirit, the mountains were still green. But now the hillside was covered with thick snow. The scenery of the south and the north was different in the same season. He came to the current Rong kingdom, which used to be the Qing kingdom. Looking down from here, there was a piece of flat land. There should have been some people on that flat land. Now there should have been smoke curling up from the chimneys and cooking. But now there were no houses left, only ruins. The ruins were covered by the snow. It was as if no one had ever lived here, and no one had ever left. The small village where he had lived for more than 10 years had been destroyed. Li Yunxin walked down the snow without leaving any footprints. When he reached the original village entrance, he raised his finger. Then, a tattered flag jumped out of the snow and unfolded in front of him. The flag had been burned by the fire, and only half was left. On it was written, The Dragon Scale Army of Rong Kingdom. After taking a few steps forward, he raised his hand again. Then, another small flag jumped out of the snow and unfolded. The flag had been hacked by knives and axes, and the marks had already become streaks. Then, it was stuck together by the dried blood, and turned into a dirty ball. Now that it was unfolded, the words were even more blurry, but he could still clearly see what was written on it. Duching State Dingzhou Commander Su. The snow could not block his vision. He swept his gaze around, and saw some broken armor and soldiers. Most of them were familiar. They should be the Qing army. A small portion was unfamiliar. They should be the Rong army. There had been a fierce battle here. The Qing army and the Rong army had fought here, and the flames of battle had destroyed this village. He stood in the snow for a moment and waved his hand. The accumulated snow disappeared in an instant, and the broken armor beneath it also turned into ashes. This place once again became a wasteland. Other than Lao Lu, no one knew that this was his hometown. When Lao Lu was in the Rong army, his status was very high. He would only appear during a major battle. As for this place, Li Yunxin did some calculations, and knew that it was just a small battle, with no more than 500 people. Ying Juren should not know what had happened here, or what meaning this place had for Li Yunxin. Perhaps a small group of the Qing army had escaped into this village deep in the mountains, and the Rong army had chased after them. A fierce battle had occurred here and destroyed this place. Perhaps it was the will of heaven, but it was also the will of heaven. Li Yunxin sighed softly and said softly, "Then the fruit of fate between us is over." The Wind Watcher continued to send news. Li Yunxin was 100 li closer to Chengdu, and had killed 3 more demons. When this news arrived, Emperor Rong was on the stage. For 2 days in a row, from the first glimmer of dawn to the first rise of the moon, he wore heavy emperor's robes, and stood quietly on the sacrificial stage made of pine wood, dragon cypress, and gold and silver. Below the stage were the Sendo of the dragon cult, and the civil and military officials of the city. Even further out were the pious commoners. The golden incense and jade candles were lit, and did not go out all day. Layers upon layers of tributes filled half of the high platform. On the afternoon of the first day, there was a strong wind and heavy snow. The official and Empress Lan advised the emperor to return to the palace and rest for a while. When there was news that Wei River Dragon King was coming, he would go up to the stage to welcome him. But the emperor was silent, and still stood solemnly in the snow. Although there was no snow on the second day, it was colder than the first. The emperor's exposed face and hands holding the incense were frozen purple. Empress Lan's heart ached so much that she shed tears. Only then did the emperor agree to the official offer a warm shelter. The people were moved by the emperor's piety, and many cried loudly. But when the moon rose, Li Yunxin still did not appear. On the afternoon of the third day, another report from the Wind Watcher arrived. Li Yunxin had gone to Chengdu, 1,400 li away. The emperor held the thin paper in his hand, and was silent for a long time. But he still stood in the snow until night, and then until dawn. Chapter 801. On the 13th day, it was the 15th of February, the Flower Festival. Although this was a festival to celebrate the birthdays of hundreds of flowers, a northern country like the Qing kingdom was still covered in wind and snow. Li Yunxin stepped on the snowy ground, and was surprised to find that in the distance, a small city had appeared on what should have been a wasteland of broken bricks and tiles. He had already reached the edge of Dongting, and found that it was sealed in ice in this cold winter. This meant that the person in charge of the lake was no longer there. Although people feared demons, they did not know that some of the conveniences in their lives were actually given to them by demons. For example, some of the precipitation inland, or the vast body of water in front of him. All large lakes and rivers, if they were in the northern winter but did not freeze, it was because powerful demons were hidden in them. Demons used their demon power to fight against the weather. It not only made their lives comfortable, but it also brought benefits to the people around them. But now that the lake did not have Lord Dongting, and no other powerful demons, it was lifeless in winter. It was said that Lord Dongting, who had gone to the East Sea, did not die. He had just been imprisoned by the old ancestor. When Li Yunxin had a long conversation with the old demon, He had said that he had treated Lord Dongting very well, and that the two of them had gotten along very well. Although what the old demon had said at that time was not all true, there was no need to lie about this matter. Now, the old demon was dead, and the former disciples of the lifeless immortal sect had mostly been killed by him. Lord Dongting, he didn't know what the result was. Perhaps he was still thinking of a way to escape in the weak water. He stepped on the ice and withered grass under his feet, and raised his eyes to look into the distance. The small city in the distance sat on the ruins of Wei. In reality, there were very few brick and wood structures. Most of them were sheds. With his current eyesight, when he used his magical powers, he could clearly see the people coming and going. The snow around the small city had all been cleared. Some of the sheds were steaming hot, and there were many people gathered there. Most of them were humans, and the rest were demons. Some of the demons had taken human form, while others did not fully transform, and still had tails or furry faces. But those people seemed to have been with demons for a long time, and were not afraid. He even saw a dark-skinned man chatting with a demon. The two seemed to be on good terms. In these tents outside the city, there were stoves and cauldrons. Some seemed to be porridge shops, giving out porridge to humans or demons. There were also some that seemed to be small vendors, making a living for themselves. However, they didn't seem to be collecting money from people coming and going. When Li Yunqin saw this scene, he felt a little gratified. Shanji should be in charge of the small town. The refugees gathered by the black chicken spirit should be sent here. He took another glance, and actually saw a familiar person. Even though he was at the Grand Supreme Realm, his heart still palpitated. He smiled and walked into the small city. This small city had no city gates, nor did it have city walls. Only a stone arch was erected on the road near the huts outside the city, with the words City of Wei written on it. The hut closest to the memorial arch was also at the outermost edge of the small city. However, there were many humans and demons around. Outside the hut, there were 8 or 9 sets of tables and chairs, all full of people. Some people didn't have a place to sit, so they stood or squatted. Everyone was holding a bowl of steaming sour soup with oil on it, slowly sipping it in the cold wind in this world of ice and snow. When he approached the crowd, the people who saw him didn't have any strange reactions. Even though he was only wearing a light and elegant white robe in this cold season, and his face was inhumanly handsome, because they had an idea in their minds, telling them that there was nothing strange about him. He was just an ordinary person. This powerful idea surpassed all rational cognition, and saved Li Yunqin a lot of trouble. He walked to the cauldron under the hut, and saw a peddler was busy, with 2 children helping him. A group of people gathered around the cauldron and raised their heads, talking to each other. In this season in the Midland, people would freeze or starve to death every moment. But in this small town, it seemed that people didn't worry about their lives. They seemed to be happy and energetic, with almost no worries. Li Yunqin looked into the cauldron, and casually said to the peddler, "How have you been?" The peddler wiped the sweat off his face, and turned to look at him. Some memories that were stored in the bottom of his heart immediately floated up. Along with those memories, there should be strong emotions that would make him dumbfounded and want to kneel down. But some kind of power suppressed this emotion and put him in a strange state. So after a slight daze, he only brightened his eyes and said happily, "Oh, it's you," he said while busy, and then said, "I haven't seen you for a long time. Almost a year." Li Yunqin smiled. "So you have escaped from the city of Wei? Okay, open the cauldron." The peddler turned to the 2 helpers and yelled, asking them to serve the soup. He wiped his hands on his apron and stood beside Li Yunqin. "If you want to talk about this, it's all thanks to God's blessing. You scolded me by the Willow River, and I felt that I couldn't make a living in the city anymore, so I wanted to go back home. But then I heard that the dragon cult was going to pray for rain in the city. I thought it would be better to work for a while before leaving, so I squeezed into the crowd." Li Yunqin realized that what he said was a long time ago. After possessing the body of the 9th young master, he hid by the Dongting Lake and created a dragon cult. And at that time, someone from Daotong came to investigate the death of Lu Ling. It was Yunzi. Before the battle between him and Yunzi, they did fight in the city. At that time, There had been no rain for months. People thought that the dragon cult was going to pray for rain. So they all gathered at the place of the battle. Unexpectedly, those people all became materials for Yunzi's sacrificial magic circle. Li Yunxin asked with interest. Then what happened? How did you escape? The peddler thought for a while and sighed. That's why I said it was God's blessing. I was doing business that day. The business was not bad. Suddenly, I felt like I was possessed by a ghost. Bah, not a ghost. Anyway, it was something. For a while, I didn't know anything. When I woke up, I found I was talking to someone. I thought about it and felt scared. You know, I was scolded by you by the river some time ago. I was thinking, oh my God, I've encountered something strange again. Could it be that the heavens don't want me to eat anymore? The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. So I packed up and left. But after I left, alas, he sighed again and again. People's hearts are made of flesh. Now I think of those people, alas. So when the city of Wei was burned, you also escaped. Li Yunxin said softly. Now you're back to your old business? Your business is better. The peddler waved his hand and smiled embarrassedly. Not really, not really. People, after experiencing life and death, have seen through everything. I used to make a living. I didn't do things honestly. But after that, I was scolded by you again. I felt like there was really a God above my head. It is God's mercy that I have escaped with my life, and am still alive. But I dare not be like before. Don't you think so? Li Yunxin smiled and nodded. So I didn't do this for money. The peddler's eyes emitted a gentle light. The castellan saved us, who should have frozen and starved to death, and gave us food. I thought with this skill, I might as well do something. Rice and flour, white-collar workers, I just spent some effort. Although I'm doing it for free, it's happier than when I was making money. He pointed to his chest. My heart is happy. Good. Li Yunxin said. You've thought it through. He looked at the stove under the big pot. The firewood was burning and the fire was blazing. He felt in his sleeve and took out a thin branch. Since you're doing good, I'll give this to you. It was just the most ordinary withered branch. It was the length of a forearm, the thickness of a little finger, and it was divided into 3 branches. The peddler was stunned and took it. Master, what is this for? For burning, Li Yunxin said with a smile. It saves you the effort of chopping firewood. He reached out and patted the peddler's shoulder. Do your job well. In the future, you must treat the people better. The peddler was stunned again. Although he was not a scholar, he knew that Li Yunxin's words were strange, people. In his impression, those who could use this word to describe a group of people were either rich or noble. But how could he be worthy? But in such a short time, the person in front of him disappeared. The peddler looked around but couldn't find him. He held the branch in his hand and murmured, Strange, strange. His expression froze. Then, it was as if all the emotions that had been suppressed in the past had burst out. He was dumbfounded at first, then suddenly widened his eyes, and his lips began to tremble. He. The surrounding customers saw him like this and asked, Old Joe, what's wrong? That person. The person who talked to me just now. He, the peddler said. It's that immortal. Who? The customer frowned. No one talked to you just now. Old Joe, are you tired? Take a break. Your 2 disciples are quite clever. Hey! The peddler suddenly knelt on the ground and kowtowed in the snow. Dear immortal, the immortal is here to see me. Good people will be rewarded. With such a commotion, the surrounding people gathered around and asked what was wrong with him. 2 disciples ran from the pot to help him up, but they also made him kowtow to the ground. After a while, he straightened up, wiped the tears and snot on his face, and raised the branch in his hand high. The immortal gave it to me. At this time, people felt that he must have gone crazy. They all knew that old Joe woke up before dawn every day, went to the forest a few miles away to chop firewood, and spent the whole morning pulling it back. At noon, he was busy until the sky turned dark. No one could bear such torment, and now he finally fell sick. They hurriedly gathered around him, wanting to pull him up and bring him into the shed to have a good rest. However, they saw him waving the branch in his hand anxiously. You don't believe me? I didn't see the immortal just now? The immortal gave it to me. Then he ran to the stove, took the fire scissors, and pulled out all the firewood that was burning in the stove. The firewood carried the fire, and the shed was made of wood and straw. The surrounding people panicked, and hurriedly used the snow to extinguish the fire. But they saw the peddler put the thin branch into the stove, trembling, and mumbled, "The immortal gave it to me. The immortal gave it to me." Seeing him like this, the two disciples were so anxious that they cried. The people around them sighed. They didn't know how a normal person could go crazy. But the next moment, as soon as the branch was put into the stove, it burst into flames. It was such a thin stick, but it ignited a fire that was more vigorous than oil. He pulled out the firewood from the stove, and the soup in the pot was no longer boiling. But now, it was like someone suddenly stirred the soup, and the boiling water almost splashed out. Everyone was stunned, and the two disciples even forgot to wipe their tears. The peddler laughed and shouted, "Look, the immortal gave it to me." As he cried out, his mind was filled with happiness. He didn't know where this thought came from, but he blurted out, "Small, small, small." The fire on the thin branch suddenly became smaller, and the pot boiled just right. He said with a trembling voice, "Extinguish, extinguish, extinguish." The fire on the branch suddenly died down. With trembling hands, he took the branch out from under the stove. Its appearance didn't change at all, and it was still cold. He raised the branch high and shouted, "The immortal showed his divinity." The people who had gathered in a circle all knelt down on the ground. Mortals like them didn't know what spiritual energy and demonic power were, but the demons in the distance knew. When they looked over, they saw the branch in the peddler's hand. They immediately felt weak, as if their spines had been taken away. If their current cultivation was a handful of clear water, the demonic power contained in the thin branch was like an endless ocean. They also knelt down in shock. They didn't know which terrifying demon king had come here. At this time, Li Yunxin had already walked along the long street into the city, and he realized that now that he had become a Grand Supreme, both his state of mind and temperament were different from before. And he found it interesting that he could realize this. If it was before, he wouldn't walk in silence like this. He would only leave contentedly after enjoying the praises of the people and demons. But now, he only felt bored. It wasn't that he didn't like that kind of praise anymore, but he felt that waiting consciously was meaningless. For example, if a noble with terrifying power heard the words of admiration from the people on the street when he passed by, he would also feel good. But if he deliberately designed to get those things, he would feel bored. How could a person of that level care about the views of ants? In the distance, outside the city, there seemed to be more and more people gathering to admire the branch in the peddler's hand. The demonic power left by Li Yunxin in that thing was just a drop in the ocean for him. But even if it was just a little bit, it could be used to burn for nearly 1,000 years. He walked like this for a while, looking and thinking slowly, and gradually understood some things in this small city. The peddler said that rice and noodles were for white-collar workers. It seemed that Pheasant had established a set of effective relief mechanism in the city, but this didn't surprise him. He would be surprised if Pheasant couldn't do this after following him for so long and having magical powers. What really surprised him was that humans and demons could get along peacefully now. It showed that Pheasant had really put in a lot of effort. As he went deep into the city, there were fewer sheds and more buildings built with earth and stone. There were many pedestrians, and they all looked happy. It was a good skill to create such a scene in such a short time. When he was thinking about this, he suddenly saw a hut made of yellow soil. Next to a pile of firewood, a dirty calico cat was lying there. Chapter 802. It wasn't that he wanted to pay attention to the calico cat, but that his attention was attracted by the cat. There was a subtle difference between the two. He had slowly realized that his cultivation had reached the Grand Supreme level, and he had entered a very mysterious state. To use an inappropriate analogy, it would be like everything in the world revolved around one's thoughts. His perception and consciousness had become abnormally strong. If he encountered something that he was not interested in, his subconscious would filter it out before his conscious mind. He knew what that thing was and what his current state was, so he would not spare a bit of attention to it. It was as if there was a loyal and careful thinking servant in his mind, removing all distractions for him, and allowing him to focus only on things that were truly useful and interesting. When ordinary people were observing and thinking, they would inevitably be disturbed by distractions. Some people would enter a temporary state of emptiness when they were focused on one thing. At that time, even if someone called out to them, they would not hear. Li Yunxin's current situation was that he was in this state of emptiness at all times. But if someone called out to him, he could hear it, but it was no longer able to disturb his mind. This was probably the so-called insight into the affairs of the world, a kind of concentration that was difficult to describe in words. But when he saw the calico cat, his will went against his conscience. This made his heart move slightly, and he stopped in his tracks. The cat was very dirty, and the hair on its back was tangled in locks, and the color of mud almost covered its original color. It was lame on one front leg, lying under the pile of firewood, and occasionally licking the leg and the snow on the ground. It was so thin that it seemed like it had not eaten for a long time. In this era, in this kind of place, it was not as easy for cats with disabilities to survive as it was in his time. There was not much food in every household that could be thrown away for a stray cat that had lost its ability to hunt. It was dirty and thin, so it was difficult to tell if it was that calico cat. Li Yunxin stared at it for a while, but he did not see any intelligence in its eyes. But he still took a step forward, wanting to catch it and take a good look. But the cat stood up alertly, glanced at him, turned its head, and was about to run away with its tail between its legs. He raised his finger, and the cat was imprisoned by his power. After that, the dirt on its back exploded into dust and quickly dissipated, and its fur became smooth and shiny again. The markings on her fur were the same as that of the 3 flowers. The cat floated in the air and began to struggle, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. She even lowered her ears and shrank her nose to flatter him. However, he soon realized that there was no way he could get out of this predicament, so he could only whimper in a low voice. The man and the cat stared at each other for 3 breaths in the crowded street where no one noticed them. Then Li Yunxin sighed softly. "Come out." After a while, the door of the thatched hut opened. A man in colorful clothes poked his head out to look at Li Yunxin, before he squeezed out with a fawning smile on his face. "Aya, Dragon King, sect leader, president, do you think I'm doing well here?" Li Yunxin smiled. "Well done. I've heard of Brother Shanji's fame on the way here." He raised his hand and pointed. "What's wrong with her?" Shanji was flattered and rubbed his hands. "Aya, she was hurt by a demon king. I ran into her and saved her." His face became gloomy again. Unfortunately, she couldn't keep her cultivation and sanity. "What about the demon king?" "Here." Shanji pointed to his neck. The colorful clothes were wrapped in a thick black fur collar, which looked noble. "It's a bear demon." Then he stammered, "Dragon King." Li Yunxin asked straightforwardly, "You want to save her?" Shanji took a deep breath. After all, she was the one who gave us lectures. Now, Shuck and Sky are gone, and the sheriff can't find their whereabouts for the time being. There are only me and Jessen in the city. Although he carefully looked at Li Yunxin's face. "Although she wasn't on our side before. She didn't hurt us, nor did she hurt you. Now that she has fallen to this point, I really can't bear it." Li Yunxin just hummed, and his expression didn't change. The door of the mud hut was open, and Li Yunxin walked in by Shanji. The hut looked shabby from the outside, but it was clean inside. The walls were painted with white dust, and covered with bamboo curtains. There wasn't much furniture, only a bed, a chair, a desk, and a bookshelf. Except for that, there was nothing extra. It could be seen that the owner was indifferent to fame and fortune, happy to live in poverty, and had a little fun. Shanji followed in, and saw Li Yunxin reach into his sleeve, take out a scroll, and unfold it on the table. He recognized it. When he walked with Li Yunxin to the East Sea Kingdom, he saw him open it several times. It was the Imperial Landscape Map. The map recorded the Earth Chi of the 36 countries in the Midland in detail. Li Yunxin looked down and said, "Where did you save her?" Shanji hurriedly came over and pointed. "Here. In Chun." At that time, Rongjun was attacking the old capital of Chun, and the emperor of Chun summoned several monster kings to help. As a result, before Rongjun attacked the city, the monster kings lost their temper and killed and ate people in the city, and the city was broken. It was here that I saved her. Li Yunxin glanced at him. Were you with Rongjun at that time? Shanji hurriedly said, I was brought back to the land by the 9th young master, and I was passing by Chun. I saw Rongjun attacking the city, and I remembered that Emperor Rong was also on Dragon King's side. So I helped him. Li Yunxin said ambiguously. You are nostalgic. But remember, we have nothing to do with Emperor Rong from now on. Shanji was stunned and then shocked. Ah? Dragon King, did Ingjuren offend you? He is a good man. This was a flat land a month ago. I thought of the little monster protection, so I went to Rong City to find him. He happily sent an army to help me build the city. He also said that the city of Wei would only be the city of Wei in the future, not the city of Wei of the Rong Kingdom. I thought he was a very loyal man. Li Yunxin raised his eyebrows. Oh, he really didn't know about this. But Shanji thought that his expression was not sincere surprise but a tease. He sighed and said, Dragon King. I quite like him. He acts like a demon, not like a human. He is cheerful and interesting. It is said that few emperors are as interesting as him. You once said that if we let him manage the world and gather more believers, we can have a continuous stream of incense. I think he is doing well in the dragon cult now, and the whole Rong Kingdom is worshipping you. Li Yunxin smiled. Then according to you, how should I treat him? According to me. Shanji said these 3 words and suddenly froze. Then cold sweat oozed out of his forehead. He suddenly came to his senses, or suddenly realized. What was wrong with him? He suddenly became talkative. He poured out all his thoughts, and even tried to instruct the Dragon King how to do. Was he out of his mind? Although he was a subordinate of Li Yunxin and had a relationship with him, he knew that he was just a bird and a beast that had not yet shape-shifted and had just begun to develop spiritual intelligence. It was the whim of the Dragon King, not out of kindness, that gave him the opportunity to have today's atmosphere and achievements in a very short time. But these demons were different from Lu Gongzan and the 9th young master. Lu Gongzan had been with the Dragon King since he was young and had a deep relationship with him. If Li Yunxin was not there, Lu Gongzan would be their master. And the 9th young master had a very special bond with Li Yunxin. His identity and status were incomparable to these little demons. If Lu Gongzan was not there, the 9th young master was also half a master, and they were just the capable subordinates of the Dragon King. When he was satisfied, he would smile and be gentle, and teach them some methods. However, the intimacy between them was insurmountable. I don't know what's wrong with me right now. I've actually poured out all of my thoughts. The Dragon King has always been a ruthless person who would smile at people one moment and turn hostile and kill them the next. I'm afraid he's not happy right now. Thinking of this, Shanji knelt on the ground and bowed his head. I deserve to die. I made a slip of the tongue. How can I instruct the master? Seeing him like this, Li Yunxin laughed. You're crazy. What's going on? I'm asking you sincerely. How do you want me to repay Ingjuren? Shanji pondered on the ground for a while. Realizing that Li Yunxin's tone was not angry, he dared to raise his head slowly. He said he wanted to cultivate. I have the method passed down by the master, but I didn't dare to give it to him without his permission. I just said that I would ask the Dragon King to decide after seeing the Dragon King. Li Yunxin waved his hand slightly and lifted him up. He thought for a while and shook his head. Anything is fine. Not just this. Shanji blinked. Why? Li Yunxin thought again and said seriously. We have just defeated the Xianmen. So all the countries in the world are no longer restrained by those cultivators and can compete with each other. Although this competition isn't exactly fair. Anyway, people use their own strength to do some things. You don't know what the people in the Midland can do in the past tens of thousands of years without the oppression of the Xianmen. But I know. Ingjuren is a person in this world. He thinks that the strongest power in this world is cultivation and magic power. But it's not. There is a power that is far stronger than those. And it's not for thousands or tens of thousands of people to benefit, but for everyone in the world. Ingjuren will soon become the overlord of the Midland. His words and deeds, his hobbies, will have a great impact on the people in the world in the future. I can ask him to be able to cultivate, but if I do this, the emperor will like the Shinto, and the people in the world will like it. And at that time, without the constraint of the Xianmen, cultivation will become the mainstream of the world. After a while, the officials and nobles will not even need to take cars when they go out. As long as the cultivators use a talisman and a thought, it will be convenient. In this way they will go down the wrong path. Li Yunxin said in a low voice. Shrinking in the egg shell, they feel that they have insight into everything in the world. But they don't know that there is something more worthy of pursuing outside this shell. And it is also the only way out. Pheasant pondered carefully for a while. Although he couldn't understand every word Li Yunxin said, he vaguely knew that his master seemed to be saying that if the mortals in the world became a trend of cultivation, it would cover their eyes and make them not see some other more valuable things. He frowned. Just as he was about to think about it, Li Yunxin had already seen through his mind. He smiled and said, "Let me ask you. Look around this room. People process the wood to make tables, chairs, and benches, and then process the soil to build walls. But a long time ago, people didn't know these things. They still lived in caves and ate raw food. These things that ordinary people can eat and keep warm, this kind of progress, are they created by cultivators or by people who don't know how to cultivate?" Pheasant understood what Li Yunxin wanted to say, but he still thought for a while. But cultivation, as long as there are people who can cultivate the holy sense, it can't be prohibited. Li Yunxin nodded. "I know. But in reality, cultivation and the other thing I mentioned, human skills and progress, may not be incompatible with each other. I'm just afraid that they see one and lose the other, just like in the past 40,000 years." He stopped and reached out to knock on the table. He raised his hand and drew a few lines in the void. Then a clear light flashed, and a strange thing fell into his palm. "If you want to repay him for building the city, give him this. Tell him that if he studies it thoroughly and thinks it through, this thing can bring him more power than cultivation and holy sense." Pheasant hurriedly reached out and carefully took it. The thing in his hand was constantly moving in a regular pattern. It was made of glass. A big box was connected to two small boxes by thin pipes. There was a cloud of black qi in the small box on the left, and a cloud of white qi in the small box on the right. Pheasant probed a little, and immediately found that these two clouds were extremely pure qi of yin and yang. The demonic power contained in them might not be exhausted even after thousands of years. The qi of yin and yang in the two small boxes was transmitted into the big box through the pipes. The two qi intersected, and immediately exploded. But the big box imprisoned the explosion, so the resulting force could only rush up. There was a baffle on the top of the big box, and the baffle was connected to an iron awl. So when the baffle was pushed up, the iron awl came out. When the force caused by the explosion was reduced, the baffle fell down again. So the process was repeated. Pheasant thought it should be a weapon, but he couldn't find the right way to use it. He also realized that the force caused by the explosion in the small box was actually very small. The small iron awl pushed by it might not even be able to pierce 2 layers of cotton. He looked at Li Yunxin doubtfully. Seeing Li Yunxin cough, he said, "I don't know the prototype and principle of the steam engine. Just make one. But it's enough. I'll give it to him after I leave, and tell him that I don't support his cultivation." Pheasant didn't dare to ask what steam chicken was. He was afraid that Li Yunxin would refine himself into that thing out of interest. So he hurriedly used his holy sense to put away the weapon. Then he said, "Master then, Mrs. Sanhua," Li Yunxin sighed, "you really know how to make trouble for me." Chapter 803. Pheasant understood the tone of this sentence. He didn't blame him, but he made a concession. He was delighted, but then he heard Li Yunxin say, "In the beginning, she helped me, and I helped her. Later, her body was destroyed because of some things caused by her master, the man of Qingshui. Now we're even. Her mind and cultivation were destroyed by the monster king. which should be blamed on the man of Qingshui. Besides, Sanhua, there's also goddess Penglai. Li Yunxin shook his head. I have to help them all. Otherwise, we can't break the connection. Pheasant was stunned. It was not because his master suddenly said something like retribution or fruit of fate. When he came back this time, almost all cultivators and demons knew about these things. It was because Li Yunxin seemed to care about these things. But according to his previous temperament, he didn't care. He did things according to his own will and preferences. He was anxious and felt that he seemed to have caused trouble for him. But Li Yunxin's tone was gentle, and his attitude was rare. Just like before, he blurted out what was in his mind. Master, why do you care about this now? After saying that, he regretted it. What was wrong with him today? However, he didn't know that even with Taoist Qing Shui's cultivation experience, he couldn't hide his thoughts in front of Li Yunxin because of her terrifying Taishang realm, let alone him. Li Yunxin didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed. Ignorance is fearless. But I'm not afraid, I just feel trouble. Some of these things. For example, if I help Sanhua today, but don't help goddess Penglai, there will be some troubles in the future. If I help them all, you'll be in trouble. Your trouble is my trouble. It's the same thing. Pheasant plucked up his courage to ask. What trouble? Li Yunxin stared at him with a faint smile and didn't say anything. Until Pheasant was scared, he heard Li Yunxin sigh. There were many things in the past. You've done a lot of work for me, but I rarely look at you. Everyone is the center of their own world and has their own feelings and thoughts. I know this, but I'm too lazy to think about it. Looking at you now, you've changed. He pauses. When I hid from Yin Zi on the edge of Dongting, you were still a chicken mouth. As a result, his cultivation had deepened, and he had become more handsome. Is it based on my appearance? Shanji blushed. I dare not to compare with you, master. Li Yunxin smiled. So you've liked Sanhua ever since you listened to her preaching and slowly gained spiritual intelligence? The pheasant was stunned and couldn't say a word. Li Yunxin smiled again. All right. If you want to save her, beg me. Pheasant had been with Li Yunxin for a long time, even longer than Sanhua. He felt that after his cultivation improved, he was no longer a fool. On the way to Donghai, Li Yunxin ordered him to do many things. As long as he was reminded, he would understand. Later, Li Yunxin asked him to coax the ninth young master, and he thought he did a good job. But today, when he saw his master again, he felt that he had become a moron. He didn't know how to answer every word he said. He was stunned for a while. Beg you. Li Yunxin said seriously, beg me. Pheasant blinked and had to say. Then, I beg you, I agree. After saying this, Li Yunxin suddenly raised his hand and patted on the Huangyu Jingtian map on the table. With his current cultivation, even the ground of the city of Shaowei should be cracked. Not only the table, but also the ground. However, the wooden table was steady and didn't even shake. However, Pheasant suddenly felt that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth around him suddenly became rich. Some kind of extremely powerful and terrifying power directly interfered with the operation of qi activity between heaven and earth. And by interfering with a few points of qi activity that could cause geometrical changes, it forcibly reshaped the flow of spiritual power in the nearby extremely vast world. Once he realized that Li Yunxin was using such a means, Pheasant immediately felt thirsty and dizzy. What realm had his master reached now? But before he could carefully experience this powerful supernatural power that was far beyond his imagination, the change of spiritual qi around him had already ended. Li Yunxin waved his hand and put away the Huangyu Jingtian map on the table. Pheasant said in a trembling voice, Master, what realm are you now? That's it. It's done. Li Yunxin said casually. Now I'm Taishang. The words it's done and Taishang were more shocking than letting Pheasant see the purple qi gathering in the air, the divine light suddenly appearing, the withered tree growing flowers, and the dead coming back to life. How could it be so easy for Li Yunxin to reverse the qi of heaven and earth, reshape a person's consciousness and cultivation? It was really as easy as lifting a finger. He couldn't say anything for a while, and just stared at him. Congratulations, master. Li Yunxin laughed and raised his hand to touch his forehead. If old Lu were here, he would definitely think of some fancy ways to praise you. It makes me feel comfortable and not exaggerated. You're good at doing things, and you should learn how to coax people. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble in the future. At this point, Li Yunxin had mentioned Pheasant's trouble several times. Pheasant came to his senses. He first smiled embarrassedly and then blinked. Master, what kind of trouble is it? Li Yunxin looked at him with a smile. You can experience it yourself in the future. His face became serious again. Since you asked me to help them, I'll let you settle it in the future. Take care of them yourself. After saying this, he waved his hand, and a wind rolled up the snowflakes and sent two figures in from outside the door. They've gained consciousness, but they're still ignorant people. Now your cultivation is not low, so teach them the method in the future. It's also a way to repay her previous kindness. Pheasant took a closer look. He thought it was a person, but now it was two cats. It was the tricolor cat. The other was a gray cat with long hair and smoky makeup, but he was not familiar with it. He was stunned. The calico cat used to be the incarnation of the Reiki of heaven and earth. Li Yunxin walked to the two little beasts, and they obediently lowered their heads without hiding. He said he only gave them consciousness, which meant he only reshaped their demon bodies. But he didn't ask them to transform into human beings, just like Pheasant in the past. They had to listen to the preaching and slowly cultivate to transform into human beings. The other one is the former goddess Penglai, also the incarnation of the heaven and earth. A long time ago, they gathered incense and Reiki for Shinryu. Later, when Shinryu transformed into the world, their souls and Reiki were almost absorbed. That's why they looked crazy when we saw them before. Now I use the Reiki of heaven and earth to replenish their remnant souls and make them complete. But it also makes them forget a lot of things. As their cultivation grows, they'll remember slowly. He turned to look at Pheasant. You can be their senior brother. Teach me the method. How many demons are there in the city now? How many of them are useful? Pheasant wanted to ask more about their lives. But when he heard Li Yunxin's serious tone in the last two sentences, he knew the catching up was over. So he reached out and put the two extraordinary little beasts into his sleeve, and answered seriously. Master, now there are 113 demons in the city. Their cultivation is not high, they're just small demons. There were 227 of them, who were out and about. Their cultivation is not high, but they're clever. Well, Li Yunxin thought for a while. Are they willing to live with humans? Yes, Pheasant said seriously. Before the 9th young master went to the sea to find Master, he told me to stay on land. He said that I would distract Master. So I thought, what should I do? So I gradually found that these demons have a hard life. Now the big demons fight with humans, and also with each other. Without the suppression of the Xian men, they learn to be like humans, forming demon soldiers with demons. But after the Cloud Mountain, there were fewer demons with cultivation, so they captured those who had just transformed to make up the numbers. Although their physical strength is stronger than humans, the human army knows the tactics of war, and their armor is excellent. Besides, there will be demons and cultivators to help, so they don't have an advantage. After a period of time here, these little demons are also suffering. Those who can escape have escaped just to survive. Then I gathered them together and put them under control. Some work in the city, and some go out. After living with humans for a while, they will taste the benefits. Although they don't dare to eat human flesh, they can eat their fill. They don't need to sleep in the open, and there are eaves to shelter them from the wind and rain. They will slowly get used to it. Li Yunxin smiled. These people have just taken human form, but they already know human etiquette? Pheasant knew what Li Yunxin was asking. Most demons transform, but they only look like humans. They still act like wild beasts. They don't understand the human heart, nor do they know what can be touched and what can't. For example, Bai Yunxin's 9th young master can already read and read poetry, but he still treats humans like animals. But most of those who like to harm and eat humans won't escape. They can do evil with those big demon kings, but they stay. Of those who escaped, Some didn't understand the ways of the world and were killed. Some don't understand at first, but after experiencing many things, they slowly understand. When they come to me, I still kill those who don't repent, Pheasant said calmly. So not everyone who comes here is sensible. Those who don't understand are all dead. When he said these words, there was a murderous aura that couldn't be hidden. Li Yunqi nodded. He knew that Pheasant learned from him, so he didn't go astray. He asked again, "You said the Demon Kings fight. What about nearby?" "I was about to report to my master." Pheasant raised his hand. Although the city of Little Wei was built less than 2 months ago, there are already some demons who are restless. A few days ago, they sent messengers to the city of Little Wei to pay offerings. I broke the messengers' necks and hung them outside the city. After that, they stayed quiet for a few days, probably because I am the master's general. They are afraid of the master's prestige, so they don't dare to act rashly. But a few days ago, some dead souls escaped from the sea, saying that their master, Emperor Li, was killed by the ancestor. And that ancestor is already the Grand Supreme, and killed Li Yunqi. I don't believe it. But the news spread very fast. So a few days ago, some demon kings began to be restless. But these days, the master asked those dead demon kings to hold their heads and walk around, and then they became quiet again. Li Yunqi smiled. So what do you think we should do? Pheasant thought for a while and answered solemnly. These demon kings are capricious, like wild dogs in the forest. When you are strong, they dare not act rashly, but once something happens, they will surround you and eat you. Letting them go is not a long-term solution. We should get rid of them quickly. Li Yunqi smiled again. Tell me your plan. Set up a banquet, invite them to come. Provoke them to fight among themselves, and then kill the rest. Li Yunqi said with relief. Good. You have learned some of my skills. But you don't have to go through so much trouble. You spread the word. Say that the day after tomorrow, Li Yunqi will speak in the city of Wei, and all demons within 1,000 miles will come to listen. If you dare not come, think in advance whether you want to be a cushion or a blanket. Pheasant was happy. Yes. But after thinking for a while he asked again, Master, Lu Gongzan and the 9th young master, are they? Yes. Pheasant was anxious. Then, I came back to save them. You don't have to worry about it. Pheasant still said, Master, if it's because of this place, I can deal with it. Don't delay the master's business. Li Yunqi smiled and shook his head. It's not a delay. This is also part of the business. Now besides me, there is also a grand elder on the land. I don't want to have a head-on conflict with him. I have to wait for a person to return to him from the sea and tell him what happened there. Then he can think carefully about whether to provoke me or not. I'm doing this here, so that the demons in the world can think again, whether they can afford to provoke the city of Wei and the little demon king. Pheasant felt an inexplicable emotion in his heart. This emotion made him choke. Yes, Master made such a plan for me. Then he realized that Li Yunqi actually told him these things. What was his plan and why? But in the past, he didn't need to tell him these things. He just needed to carry them out. His heart was stirred up again, and he couldn't help but kneel down and kowtow. In the future I will. Li Yunqi raised his hand to lift him up. Too many flags are harmful to the body. Keep it in your heart. Pheasant was stunned. He didn't know what the story of too many flags are harmful to the body was. Then he thought again, and felt that he still had a lot to learn from old Lu. Then he heard Li Yunqi asked again, Where is Qiao Jiesin? Pheasant took a deep breath and calmed down, and then said, She is at her home. Li Yunqi was stunned, and then realized that the home Pheasant said should refer to the former Hongfu escort agency of Qiao's. Pheasant and the other demons heard Mrs. Sanhua's lecture for the first time, and it was there. After being separated by the Xianmen at Baihiku, she seemed to have some other lucky chances. With the guidance of a monster king, she gradually regained her sanity and learned to cultivate. Pheasant said in a low voice, Unfortunately, the monster king was killed by another monster king, and she escaped from the cave. She couldn't find us, so she had to wander in the wilderness. A few days ago, she returned to the city of Wei and helped some people. Those people regarded her as a goddess and called her Lady Sui. She was there when I came. After that, she left things to me and didn't like to do things. It's time to miss the old days. Li Yunxin was silent for a while, and then nodded slightly. Okay. I'll go and see her. You go back to your place to do things. Pheasant smiled and said, Master is already in my cave residence now. Li Yunxin realized that this shabby room was actually the residence of Pheasant, the master of the city of Wei. This was not like him, but he raised his hand and patted Pheasant's shoulder. Good job. Chapter 804. The former Qiao's escort agency was on Taoxi Road, and behind it was the Dragon King Temple of Lu Gongzan. But this street was already destroyed before the city of Wei was destroyed, because of the fierce battle when Li Yunxin possessed the body of the ninth young master. At that time, people should have thought that it was just a rare battle between demons and monsters, but they didn't realize that it was the beginning of the destruction of a great city, and also the beginning of drastic changes in the world. But now the reconstruction of the city of Wei was mostly carried out according to the streets of the former city of Wei. This should have something to do with Qiao Jiesen's nostalgia. The purpose of Li Yunxin's trip was to rescue Lu Gongzan and the ninth young master, and also to settle some matters on the land. Some people wanted to stay here, and he had to prepare a way out for them. He just wanted to go to the netherworld alone, because he clearly knew the dangers underground, and it should be unimaginable, even for someone in the Grand Supreme Realm. He walked along the road while thinking, and saw some familiar scenery. Some of the houses were built in the same way as they used to be, although they couldn't be compared to the rich houses in the city of Wei before it was destroyed. The location and shape were similar. Even trees were transplanted, but he couldn't tell if they were still alive. He only saw the snow on the branches, as if they were afraid of the cold. He walked forward a dozen steps, turned a corner, and saw an old locust tree. Although it should be a newly transplanted tree, judging from its position, it should be the one he saw that night. After seeing Ling Kongzi's Bao Huahui leave, he saw Bai Yanjun come out of the tree, and taught him the method of possessing the body of the dragons. So he realized that Black Bai Yanjun should also be in the Grand Supreme Realm, because the two of them could incarnate and bind the souls of the dead in this world, which was not something that could be done by those below the Grand Supreme Realm. Li Yunxin didn't know how to achieve this, but he guessed that some skills were needed. Below the Grand Supreme, it was very similar to the time when the technology was not so advanced in his world. A person with enough time and energy could understand and master many things by himself. However, when one advanced to the Grand Supreme Realm, a vast world would unfold before their eyes. There were many things that a person could not learn by himself. For example, in his time, many scientific researchers wanted to specialize in a certain field, but they had to exhaust their entire lives. It was very similar to a class advancement. He thought to himself. Therefore, he realized that even the Grand Supreme Black Yama King had died in the netherworld. Old Lu and the ninth young master definitely couldn't handle that kind of place. That was not a problem that could be solved with courage and intelligence alone. The road ahead was uncertain, so he wanted to go ahead alone. Li Yunxin walked for a quarter of an hour from the old locust tree to where the Qiao mansion used to be. On the way, he saw 3 more peddlers. But it shouldn't be like the sour soup peddler who did good deeds. Instead, it was a barter. The 3 stall owners looked different, but it was obvious that they were not human. The goods sold were all similar, humanoid pasta. It was the first time that Li Yunxin saw a demon behave like a human, sitting obediently in the snow behind the stall and waiting for customers. He made a chicken drumstick out and exchanged it for a small face man. This thing was the size of a palm, and it looked lifelike. It didn't have a round face like a morning hall doll, but a nose, eyebrows, and eye sockets. It looked like food, but also like a work of art. The pheasant was right. All the demons in the city had been tamed by him. The face man had been left outside for a long time, and it had frozen hard, so there were cracks on its stomach. Li Yunxin sniffed lightly and smelled something fishy. He pried open the stomach of the face man. He saw that it was bloody inside. Only then did he realize that the outside was not cooked. The things in the stomach were also arranged delicately. He could even vaguely distinguish which were the heart and which were the intestines. It should be made from the internal organs of fish or other small animals. So he smiled and didn't know how to evaluate it for a moment. If he said that these demons didn't change their nature and still wanted to eat people, it was indeed pasta and animal flesh. If he said that they were no different from human habits, no one would make such a perverted thing. He threw it into the snow pile by the roadside and saw the Chow family's mansion from afar. Different from the surrounding buildings that were only similar in location and shape, the Chow family's mansion was exactly the same as the one he remembered. But once he used his demon power to see, he would know that it was all a camouflage. The courtyard had not been rebuilt, and it was still in ruins. Someone had changed its appearance. He gathered his thoughts and walked a few steps. He stopped in front of the door for a moment, then raised his hand and pushed the door open. He had been to this house several times before, so he was familiar with the way. After passing through a moon gate and a winding corridor, he arrived at the back house. From the first 3 flowers, for small demons and a wandering soul gathered here to preach Taoism. It was in this back house. When he turned around another flower door, he saw the girl. The girl was dressed in white, but it was not ordinary clothes like his but mourning clothes. It was slightly large and not beautiful. She was sitting on a stone bench in the courtyard, facing a lump of metal on the stone table. That lump of metal was grayish-black, mixed with some gold or silver, and some gravel. Some metal must have been melted, and then condensed to become what it was today. She was called the Lady in Plain Clothes, probably because of this. The winter sun shone on the courtyard, shining on the snow, but the 2 people in the courtyard couldn't exhale any mist. Li Yunxin paused for a moment and walked across the snow to sit opposite her. He felt that the girl seemed to be the same as in his memory. In the past, he had almost forgotten what Xiao Jiesin looked like. So now it was only seemed, and other than the appearance, everything else was different. In another 2 months, it would be the season when he saw her last year. At that time, she was human, and he was also human. She had a smile on her face, carefree. Because she saw a beautiful youth, her heart blossomed, and she dared to think about the future. But she did not know that there was no future after that. Now her appearance had not changed, but she was silent and lonely. When she saw Li Yunxin, she only raised her head and stared at him. After a long time she said, "I have forgotten what you look like." Li Yunxin reached out to touch the lump of metal on the table. "What is this?" Xiao Jiesin was silent for a moment. "It is my father's knife. It was left at home." "So you still remember a lot of things." Xiao Jiesin only looked at him. At that time, how did I die?" Li Yunxin placed his hand on the table, his finger lightly tapping, saying, "I was about to continue running with you, but the swordsman caught up. I knew I could not outrun him, so I stopped. At this time, you turned and rushed back, right in front of him." Xiao Jiesin opened her mouth after a while and said with disappointment, "So it was like this. Then, why did you not save us at that time? Before I saw you, 2 swordsmen came to me. At that time, I did not have the experience of dealing with cultivators, and they used a talisman written by Tao Master Yi to seal my snow mountain and Qi Si." He had never said these words to old Lu. Now that he thought about it, it felt like a lifetime had passed. "Later I chased and ran, and finally got rid of them. I wanted to go to a crowded place to hide, and I met you on the way. At that time, my Qi Si was sealed and my body was strong. But the swordsmen took the pills of the Ling Su sword sect and overdraft their lives. So their inner strength was no less than mine at that time. The martial artists of Jianghu were proficient in the way of the sword, and I was not as skilled as them, so I could not save them." Li Yunxin paused, then said, "Asking the swordsman to kill your swordsman was because they were from the same sect as my 2 swordsmen. It was to pass the killing tribulation. Now that I look back, if we talk about fate, it was me who harmed you. It is reasonable for you to blame me." Xiao Jiesin was silent for a while, then said, "I do not blame you. You still wanted to save me at that time. You also said a lot to comfort me. It was all because of our fate. Li Yunxin sighed in a low voice. Is there anything you want? I can do a lot of things. Xiao Jiesin lowered her head. I just want to live. Li Yunxin thought for a while. Do you want to live? Or do you want the life you had when you were alive? Confusion appeared in the girl's eyes. She thought about Li Yunxin's words carefully for a while, then said, I don't know. But I just don't like the way I am now. I don't want any divine power. Or any cultivation level. I just want the life I had before I met you. Her words made Li Yunxin's heart skip a beat. He had seen many people and many demons. But the ones he met all liked change. At least the ones who were still alive and around him. The pheasant that was at the peak of the state of the transcendent would not like the days when it was a bird. And the sheriff who was still alive would not like the days when it was a beast. The ninth young master would not like the days when he was the dragon son in the state of the transcendent. And Lu Gongzan would not like the days when he was living in a temple. The red lady would not like the days when she was tied to her father. And Yu Meng would not like the days when he was an ignorant sword saint. Even the sour soup peddler would not like the days when he was alone in the city of Wei. Only this Xiao Jiesin, who was no longer a human, told him that she liked the days when she was a human, when he had not met her, and when he was walking on the willow bank in spring. Many words about the world, the rise and fall of humanity, and the state of cultivation reached Li Yunxin's lips, but he swallowed them. After a few breaths he sighed. If you want to go back to the past, there might be a way, but you will lose your current divine power and cultivation level, and you will also lose your memories. You will be immortal in the future, and you will grow old and die. You may not find your Mr. Right, or your life may change, and you may not have food and clothing. More importantly, you will lose a lot of freedom of choice. It will not be like now, where you can even control the fate of some people. If you want to regret it, you will never have the chance. Are you willing? Xiao Jiesin's eyes glowed with joy for the first time since Li Yunxin met her. I am willing, she said without hesitation. I am willing. So Li Yunxin took out the Huangyu Sutian map and unfolded it on the table. Then he took out the 9 Seas map and placed it on top. He did not see what he did, but the 9 Seas map slowly disappeared into the map below, as if it had merged with it. In fact, it was indeed so. This Huangyu Sutian map originally only marked the geography of the 30 countries in Midland, and the outside was a vast expanse of whiteness. But now on the east side of the map, the details of the 9 Seas, and even the Donghai Kingdom appeared. Moreover, this part of the 9 Seas was indeed filled with spiritual power, and it was not just marking the direction. In the blink of an eye, Li Yunxin fused the two together. He stopped, looked at the girl in front of him, and said seriously, Last year, I once painted the city of Wei and the world around it into my fan. At that time, I temporarily reached the profound realm with the help of the power of ghosts. I have done this once, and I still have the flow of qi in my mind, so it is very easy to do it again. Now that I have the cultivation of the Grand Supreme, I can do better. I can record the city of Wei and the world around it into this scroll. In the future, I may even add a wider world. Inside it should be vivid and lifelike. After people are in it, they will not realize that they are in the painting. If you want your previous life, I can also recreate your family. In this painting, they will be what you remember. For example, when you are dreaming, your consciousness constructs everything around you. You will be in your dream, in your own thoughts, and you will not feel anything wrong. Li Yunxin was silent for a moment, and then sighed softly. This is my way. I will take your soul, a ghost cultivator, and paint it into the painting to create a body. You will be an ordinary person, the ordinary person before you met me. But you may live in your own dream for the rest of your life. Are you willing to do that? Then, what about the others? Xiao Jiesin asked in a low voice. Will my family and I live in a lonely city? There will be others, Li Yunxin said patiently and slowly. But they are also illusions in your mind. But you will not realize this. The people who appear in front of you, and the people you have seen, are all people you believe. You will not feel that they are not real. I also want to find some real people to accompany you. But painting people is both easy and difficult. It is easy because for ordinary people, the aura between people is very similar. The difference between them may be only 1 in a billion. But it is also difficult because of this. Everyone is different, and there are too many people in the world. To understand these differences, it is not something that can be done in hundreds or thousands of years. If you only find a few hundred or a few thousand people to accompany you, they will soon realize that this world is limited. If you ask them to be like you, the world between you and them will conflict, and eventually become a mass of chaos. He paused for a moment. But maybe in the future, I will really record real people. But I do not know how long it will be. Xiao Jiasen's eyes lit up again. But then she asked, then does that mean there is no one in the place that I can't see? Or an empty city? Li Yunxin smiled. What does the place that you can't see have anything to do with you? Xiao Jiasen sighed. Yes. Then are you still willing? She slowly stood up and raised her head. Li Yunxin could see the fluff on her cheeks and neck that had become transparent under the sunlight. I am willing. So Li Yunxin also stood up. He walked behind the girl, raised his hand and covered her head. There was no temperature in her body, and her hair was cold, like a corpse, or made of ice and snow. Li Yunxin withdrew his hand. There was a cloud of misty green mist in his palm. Xiao Jiasen's body fell to the ground. It first turned into flesh and blood, then into flowing light, and finally dissipated in the sunlight. He walked back and sat down. He placed the cloud of misty green mist in his left hand, and then used his right hand to draw on the Huangyu heavenly painting. The city of Wei was only an inconspicuous dot in this painting, and if one did not pay attention, they would think it was a speck of dust. He used the divine art of painting in this square inch, such as carving the hair of an angel on the tip of a needle. The appearance of the city of Wei before the Great Tribulation, and the surrounding forests, mountains, and rivers were all slowly entered into this painting. He even recorded the places that he had passed along the way that were closer to this place. Therefore, apart from the area of the 9 seas, another thin stream of spiritual power appeared in the center of the midland. This copying took him an hour's time. Li Yunxin stopped when she reached the middle of the sky on the bleak winter day. Then he sent the cloud of mist in his palm into the painting. After doing all this, the courtyard quieted down. He stood still for a quarter of an hour, staring at the long scroll on the table, without any expression on his face. But dark clouds appeared in the sky, blocking the sunlight. The clouds thickened, and fine snow began to fall. In such a silent place, the snow made a sound. It did not fall on the long scroll, but slowly covered his shoulders. Li Yunxin's figure flashed and disappeared. The next moment he was under a weeping willow. It was spring. There was a gentle breeze and warm sunlight. Behind him was the Willow River, which would continue to flow into the city of Wei. The road in front of him was covered with fine white sand. The middle of the road, which was not often run over by the wheels, was slightly bulging. Occasionally 1 or 2 stalks of grass grew. He took a deep breath in silence, and saw a convoy approaching from afar. As the carriages came nearer, they saw a man on horseback. The wagons behind were loaded with goods and covered with canvas. He shifted his gaze again and saw a 13 or 14-year-old girl sitting beside the cart, twirling a thin willow branch between her fingers in boredom. His dangling legs swayed slightly, and the 2 pom-poms on his toes bounced lightly. Then she raised her head and said something to the young driver. She seemed to be happy and covered her mouth to laugh. The horseman passed him slowly, looked at him warily, and reined in his horse. After some thought he asked, "Friend, do you need a ride?" Li Yunxin smiled at him and said, "No, I am waiting for an old friend. I am Qiao Duanhong of the Hongfu Escort Agency of the city of Wei." The man cupped his hands. "Who are you waiting for?" Li Yunxin nodded with a smile. "I am waiting for the temple attendant of the Dragon King Temple, on the Taoshi Road of the city of Wei, Hunyuanzi. I am his nephew." "Oh, I see." The man's expression became peaceful. "Then I will have to trouble you." Li Yunxin nodded slightly, and he urged the horse to move forward. So the cart also slowly rumbled past him. The girl saw him and stared at him curiously. Li Yunxin smiled at her. The girl blushed and turned her head away. After the cart moved forward for a while, she turned back again. But the young man was gone. The weeping willow bank with white sand was a beautiful scene in spring. Chapter 805. At dawn, Pheasant, who was summoned, found that the Qiao's mansion had disappeared. At the former site of the mansion that Qiao Jessen had created by illusion, there was only a piece of green grass. The tender grass sprouted, turning it into a green carpet. Today, it had been 2 days since Li Yunqin came to the city of Wei. In these 2 days, not only the city of Wei, but also the surrounding area of hundreds of miles had undergone strange changes. Spring seemed to have come early. Normally, the snow on the ground of the city of Wei should have melted in more than a month. Then the weather gradually turned warm, and spring came back. But now, the surroundings had obviously warmed up, and even the gentle breeze had a moist air. He knew that his master must have changed the weather here, with his supreme magical power. But he was a clever person. 2 days ago, when Li Yunqin said that he wanted to see Qiao Jessen, he knew that they had something to talk about. In fact, about 2 hours after Li Yunqin had left, this strange change had occurred. He didn't know what happened between them. But since he was not summoned, he didn't ask. Now seeing the scene in front of him, he was surprised and opened his eyes wide. The Qiao's mansion was gone. Where was Qiao Jessen? Soon, he found that the Dragon King temple reappeared behind the Qiao's mansion, across the street. Pheasant and other small monsters used to live in the Qiao's mansion, but they knew that their master actually lived in the Dragon King temple behind the Qiao's mansion. But they never dared to run in, and only dared to watch from the top of the wall. So they were also very familiar with the appearance of the mansion. Now there was still a familiar moonlight tree in front of the Dragon King temple. The branches of the tree leaned over the lintel, like a wreath. There were new green buds on the branches, curling up as if they were sleepy. But there were more tiny white petals between the buds. Moonlight flowers and leaves always bloomed together. Looking up, they could see some bamboo tips on the top of the white wall with green tiles. Pheasant remembered that it used to be like this, which meant that the scenery in the Dragon King temple had not changed. Li Yunqin had completely restored this place. Furthermore, it was not through an illusion. His master, on the other hand, had moved a chair and was sitting under the moonlight tree. Only then did Shanji realize that it was not because of his eyes. Actually, he had seen it at first glance. But even though his eyes saw him, and his heart knew that he saw him, he turned a blind eye to him, as if Li Yunqin wasn't there. It was only now that her heart suddenly jolted. She felt that Li Yunqin's figure had suddenly jumped out of the scene in front of her. So she noticed him. He knew that this was his master's divine ability, the unimaginable grand supreme realm. He hurriedly trotted over and respectfully stood down. Master. Li Yunqin nodded and fiddled with a small white hairpin in his hand. Pheasant glanced at it, and felt that the hairpin was more like a small gun. But then he took a breath of cold air, because he saw that Li Yunqin's fingers were scratched by the hairpin, leaving a white mark. It was like an ordinary person fiddling with a sharp knife. The tip of the knife scratched the finger. Although it didn't make a cut because it didn't use much force, it would still scratch the cuticle and leave a white mark. But his master was the Grand Supreme. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fear in his heart, and instinctively leaned back a little. He heard Li Yunqin ask him, "How many people came to the spell conference today?" Pheasant hurriedly replied, "There were 6 demon kings who sent messengers to the city to make trouble before. All 6 of them came. But they just waited 50 miles outside the city and gathered together. I don't know what they were discussing. There are also 14 great demons above the true realm. They are also gathered a few dozen miles away. The rest are below the true realm. I've heard of some famous ones, about 40 to 50 of them. There are also some I haven't seen before. They should have come from somewhere else. There are about 100 of them. These people are well behaved and didn't make trouble with each other. It should be because they know that Master is really in the city, and they also know the fate of those demon kings killed by Master. There's one more. I'm not sure." Li Yunqin looked at him. "What's wrong?" "I don't know where he came from," Pheasant said. "I can see that he's below the true realm with my cultivation. But I can't see that one. I sent a few clever ones to investigate, but only one came back. It seemed that he was let back on purpose. Master knows that the demon family isn't rich and doesn't have any decent treasures. But it's said that one is rich and has only 3 or 4 magic treasures on him. He seems to have a strong background, but I can't figure out his attitude. Li Yunqing smiled. Oh, that's good. That's interesting. He asked again. When I came, I heard the black chicken spirit say that you told him that I'm not dead. But I calculated that there's less than half a month before the Emperor's ghost soldiers return to the land. They spread the news, and you refute the rumor with your subordinates thousands of miles away. It seems that there's not enough time. Now you say that some demons came from far away. How did you do it? I borrowed some small things. Pheasant reached out and took out a small jade pendant from his sleeve and presented it to Li Yunqing with both hands. There was a group of people who came here before and regarded human lives as worthless. I thought they were unruly demons, so I killed them all. Later, I learned that they were neither human nor demon, but ghost cultivators, remnants of the Freemasonry. I didn't find anything on them, and didn't leave anyone alive for interrogation. But I found a lot of this stuff. You can communicate thousands of miles away by infusing it with demon power or spiritual power. Although it works sometimes, and can only be used every few days, it's still convenient. I gave one to all the spies outside. Li Yunqing took it and looked at it casually, then returned it to Pheasant. It's indeed something of the Freemasonry. It's also the kind of thing I mentioned. Pheasant was stunned. Master, you mean? There's a delicate mechanism inside. Well, it's barely delicate. The mechanism is supplemented by demon power, and it exerts an unusual effect. This thing is already in its embryonic form. I previously said that people in this world should walk 2 paths together, and that's what I was referring to. It doesn't matter if you can't understand it now. You can study it later. He thought for a while and looked at Pheasant with a smile. Demons don't have a lot of treasures, right? Well, Pheasant blinked. And hurriedly lowered his head. I'm not. I really owe you. Li Yunqing waved his hand. I gave you a treasure of the sage on the way to Donghai, but it's someone else's thing. Since we have a master, it's not right not to pass it on to you. He frowned slightly and then relaxed. How about this? He reached out and pulled Pheasant's hand over. Before Pheasant had time to figure out what he was going to do, he saw Li Yunqing draw a circle on his right palm. This is for you. Pheasant was stunned. Seeing that Li Yunqing didn't intend to do anything else, he withdrew his hand. There was really only a circle in his palm. A circle as big as the mouth of a small bowl, drawn with white lines. There was no spiritual power or other fluctuations on it. It was like a minimalist tattoo. He was confused, but he knew that with his master's current cultivation, such an ordinary thing couldn't be an ordinary thing. Then he heard Li Yunqing say, I'm not good at refining magic weapons. It was not something that could be cultivated in a short period of time. I'll give you this thing. When you want to use it, you just shout, Pheasant Man, arm yourself. This thing will produce a layer of armor outside your body. Your real body is a red-crowned rooster, so I'll give you red armor. It's also festive. You try it and see if it suits you. Pheasant sighed in his heart. Not because he didn't like the treasure given by his lord, but because of the words Pheasant Man, arm yourself. He had seen a lot of things, and was no longer an ignorant little demon, so he knew when his lord was serious, and when he was joking. For example, this sentence was all because of his lord's bad taste. He was a dignified big demon. If he suddenly shouted such a sentence in a fight, wouldn't it be a joke? But as soon as this thought came to his mind, his heart moved again. The Qiao mansion was gone. Qiao Jiesin was also gone. He didn't know what happened between them, but now he suddenly understood that what had happened before was definitely not something that could make his lord happy. But it must not be. His lord did something bad to her, because his lord rebuilt the Dragon King Temple. This meant that he cherished the old days. But now Lao Lu was not here, and he had to save her. He fiddled with the small hairpin in his hand again. With his current realm, how much strength did he have to use to make a white mark on his finger? His master was in a bad mood now. Thinking of this, he softened his heart. Just treat it as making his lord happy. So he nodded happily. Yes. Pheasant Man, arm yourself. He shouted so loudly. and suddenly felt that the circle in his palm established a wonderful connection with his mind. His heart moved again. In the blink of an eye, a layer of red armor covered his whole palm, and then the next moment, it spread to his whole body and wrapped him tightly. He felt that the palms of his hands and the soles of his feet were suddenly filled with terrifying power. He raised his hands and looked. There was a round light spot in each of his palms. Without a doubt, as long as his mind moved, a mysterious light would shoot out from his palms and destroy all enemies in front of him. Moreover, the red, extremely thin armor on his body was not made of any kind of metal. It was a layer of strange spiritual power that he had never seen before. This spiritual power was so strong that it condensed into a substance. It was incompatible with the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, isolating his own breath, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth outside. Then he realized that this armor was for him to save his life. Although it was isolated from heaven and earth, and couldn't cast many divine abilities that required the help of spiritual chi, judging from the density of the layer of spiritual power that formed the armor, he had no doubt that even a full-force strike from a profound realm demon wouldn't be able to damage it in the slightest. In front of this armor, the spiritual power that a profound realm demon could muster was like a stream of water. He was both surprised and happy. With a thought, he kept the treasure and asked, "Master, what is this?" "It's amazing." Li Yunxin looked at him with a smile. "It's the power of the netherworld. In the east, there is a seal condensed by the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, which prevents the power of the netherworld from spreading to the whole midland. As for that seal, it uses about 1/10 of the spiritual chi of the midland to fight against it. Therefore, to break your armor, it has to condense the spiritual chi to a similar degree. Except for the current Rock King, probably no one in the world can do this. So, at least you won't die in the future." Hearing this, Pheasant was so happy that he wanted to kneel down and kowtow for a few times. However, he knew that his master didn't like this kind of thing. It was undignified. Thus, he forcibly suppressed his joy and said, "I understand, master." Li Yunxin smiled and stared at him for a while. Suddenly he sighed and said, "Forget it. You don't need to say that. I'm just kidding." Pheasant hurriedly said, "I like it. It sounds majestic and can steal people's minds." Li Yunxin was stunned, but then he smiled again and waved his hand, saying, "I understand your intention, but in the future, you will have to lead a group of monsters. This is not dignified. Forget it." Pheasant was stunned and frowned, saying, "Lead? Master, lead the monsters? What's wrong?" Pheasant thought for a while and said, "I thought Master called people here to hold a spell conference to kill them all. I thought that Master didn't want to see the monsters grow up." Li Yunxin thought for a while and said, "Oh, you thought that I wanted Ingjuren to build a unified dynasty and kept mentioning the fate of humanity because I wanted to put people first? You're wrong." He was silent for a while and thought for a while. Then he said, "Listen carefully to what I'm going to say next. It's not a lecture, but it's good for you. I've only experienced it recently. Listen to it first. Although you might not be able to understand it, it's beneficial." Pheasant immediately restrained his energy and got rid of all distracting thoughts and said in a low voice, "Yes, I'm listening." Li Yunxin was silent for a while and then said, his first sentence was, "Heaven and earth are heartless and treat all things as straw dogs." You probably haven't heard of this sentence before, but you should understand the meaning of straw dogs. When he spoke, he used a normal tone. At most, he was just slightly serious. But Pheasant immediately realized that these words were not only for him, but also for others. Because these words contained great power, he could hear them clearly here. He had no doubt that the monsters hiding in the houses further away could also hear them clearly, as if they were right next to their ears. He had already spread the news that Li Yunxin was going to give a lecture the day before yesterday. The monsters in the city were the first to know, since they realized that the sect master, president, and the Grand Supreme Master was going to give a lecture. They were overjoyed. They were all small monsters with low cultivation. It was the time for them to cultivate the divine will technique from the beginning, and not have to disperse their cultivation. So they slowly figured out where Li Yunxin was, and hid in the surrounding houses for a long time, afraid that they would miss something. Further away, the fiendish demons dozens of miles away that Shanji mentioned also heard the sound clearly. They had no choice but to listen. It suddenly sounded in their divine senses. This was an unimaginable supernatural power. It was far more shocking than any overturning of rivers and seas. But except for those monsters, the people in the city could not hear or see anything. And the reason why Li Yunxin only told him, Pheasant guessed that it should be because of the matter of fated fruit. He was telling it to himself, not to anyone else. As for what others would understand, what opportunities they would get, and what results they would end up with, it had nothing to do with his master. Just like how he used to ask him to beg him. Then he heard Li Yunxin's second sentence. This is a saying from where I came from. I am not a person of this world. I come from the heavens beyond the heavens. Chapter 806. Shanji's heart skipped a beat. He had long felt that his master's origin was extraordinary, and his words and actions were also strange. He wondered if he had some secrets. But he didn't expect that when he wanted to ask but didn't dare to, he would say it at this moment. But he forced himself to calm down and didn't show his extreme shock. As for other demons, except for a few people, they had never been in contact with Li Yunxin. So they didn't have such doubts as Shanji. Since they didn't have doubts, they didn't feel deeply. There were many secrets in this world that they didn't know. When they heard him say from the heavens beyond the heavens, they didn't have a particularly strong feeling. After all, reaching the Grand Supreme Realm within a year was far more shocking than coming from any other world. Li Yunxin continued. In the world beyond the heavens, there are also emperors, generals, ministers, and peddlers and pawns. The emperor's sacrifice is the same as this world, using 3 animals. But the people can't afford to use 3 animals, so they use dogs. Later on, they use grass to make grass dogs to replace the live dogs. This thing is called a straw dog. A straw dog is sacred before the sacrifice. The people put it away respectfully after it is made, not daring to touch it too much. But when the sacrifice is over, they throw it away casually. The thing made of grass is not precious. No one will take a second look at it. Li Yunxin paused and said, the so-called heaven and earth are not benevolent and treat all things as straw dogs, which means that heaven and earth are selfless. Everything in the world, whether it is grass, trees, humans, or animals, is the same. For example, the straw dog that is thrown away after the sacrifice is not concerned. But even if they don't care, they all care. The aura between heaven and earth surges like bellows. All things grow, rise and fall, the cycle of reincarnation never drying up. This is not benevolence but benevolence. When he said this, the moonlight tree beside him suddenly grew green leaves and flowers bloomed. And the demons hiding everywhere were a little relieved when they heard that he was really speaking now, and that his opening was so grand. They all knew Li Yunxin's style of doing things in the past. He was famous for his viciousness and ruthlessness. But now he seemed to have changed and become kind. So the little demons in the city slowly walked out of the house and gathered on the grass that used to be the ruins of the Qiao family's mansion. None of them dared to act rashly and obediently found a place to sit. They did not know how to listen or what to do when they were listening to the Dharma. They only knew that this kind of thing could only be encountered by chance and could not be sought. It all depended on one's own luck and luck. Although there were many things that he did not fully understand, it was better to memorize them first. Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then said, there's one more thing. This is called the heartless saint, treating the common people like straw dogs. What is the difference between the saint realm and the heaven and earth realm? Right here. He raised his hand slightly and plucked a moonlight petal from a branch beside him. Twirling flower said, the saints are heartless, but there are those who are petty. For example, now that I see this tree is pleasing, I tell it to blossom. I saw that the city of Wei was pleasing, so I called it the return of spring. The ruthlessness of heaven and earth included plants, trees, earth, and rocks, but the ruthlessness of saints only included living beings. As for the others, I don't care, nor do I view them as dogs. The sage treats all living beings in the world equally, be it humans or fiendish demons. He is benevolent to living beings, but like me, he has his own preferences and choices. Compared to the heaven and earth realm, he is slightly inferior. The pheasant was listening quietly. However, at this moment, more than 10 great demons descended from the sky. As soon as they landed, the demons on the grass all moved away and made space for them. One of the demons seemed to be understanding. When he landed, he bowed deeply to Li Yunxin and asked, "Dragon King, the sage you mentioned is different from the saints of the celestial sect, who are too emotionless. What do you mean?" Li Yunxin did not look at him, but at the pheasant. The chicken spirit understood and said, "Master, please solve my doubts." Li Yunxin then said, "What the celestial sect cultivates is evil. The so-called celestial sect of celestial sect is also evil. They are not too high but too low. They are too low." The demons were in an uproar. However, it was not that they were surprised or disagreed. Instead, in the tens of thousands of years of the celestial sect of celestial sect, this was the first time someone publicly denounced the celestial sect of celestial sect as evil. Moreover, it was not some demon king who was cursing in his cave abode. Instead, it was said by a grand supreme expert. That made them feel an indescribable sense of joy. Only then did they realize that Li Yunxin, who was speaking, was a demon. He was on their side. What do you mean by too low? It refers to those saints of the celestial sect of celestial sect. Li Yunxin's tone was slightly cold. Ordinary people, even you demons who have transformed, can fall in love. You don't have benevolence, but you have your own preferences. You don't have the living beings of the world in your hearts, but you have things that you care about. Therefore, you can place your emotions and also take a look at the heaven and earth realm and the grand supreme realm. However, because ordinary people are in love, they don't know how to restrain themselves. If they make this love chaotic and paranoid, it will be a bad thing. However, what's worse is the cultivation method of the celestial sect of celestial sect. To cultivate this love, the cultivation level is too low. It is really emotionless, like a walking corpse. The people of the celestial sect of wonders regard this as the supreme, but in reality, it is the lowest grade. Heaven and earth, the heartless and emotionless sages, are the great benevolence that comes after extreme emotions. As for the cultivators of the celestial sect of wonders, it was a great evil after being heartless. The two may seem similar, but there's a world of difference. For example, my speech today, regardless of whether they had done evil, repented, or stubbornly refused to come to their senses, they were all treated equally. However, if it was the feelings of the celestial sect of wonders, I'm afraid they would all be killed. The demon who asked the question felt a chill in his heart when he heard the last sentence. "Thank you, Dragon King, for dispelling my doubts. Thank you, Dragon King, for dispelling my doubts." He quickly sat down. But another voice rang out. It sounded in the sky, coming from all directions. It was as if a god was speaking in the sky. "Then, sir, are you truly the Taishang Wangqing now?" His voice was laced with vigorous demonic power, which was even louder and clearer than Li Yunxin's voice, like a sudden clap of thunder. Not only the demons in the city could hear it, but also the people could hear it. Since yesterday, Shanji had issued an order in the city. He told people to stay away from the Qiao's house for the time being, so as not to disturb the peace. But now the city of Wei was small. Looking around, they could still see some pedestrians passing by on the street. Now that they suddenly heard the voice in the sky, most of the pedestrians on the street were surprised and looked up at the sky. Shanji turned around and shouted, "Where did this madman come from? Get down!" But the man in the sky didn't show up. He just smiled. "If you..." Li Yunxin raised his hand and flicked out the moonlight flower petal on his fingertip. But like an ordinary person flicking the flower, it only flew 3 or 4 inches before it lost its strength and floated to the ground in midair. However, in the sky, the wisps of clouds above the city of Wei were suddenly dispersed by some kind of force, like a drop of detergent suddenly dripping on an oil film, and were instantly forced to the far end of the sky, forming a ring of clouds. The man only said 3 words, and then snorted heavily. A figure appeared in midair, trying to fly the clouds again in embarrassment. But it seemed that all his supernatural powers were confined. After dancing for a while, he still fell down. With a bang, he fell on the grass and smashed a hole. At this time, the pedestrians on the street suddenly showed a blank look on their faces. But soon they calmed down and continued to do their own things. They had forgotten what had just happened. After a while, the fallen person climbed out of the hole. There was already a circle of small demons around the hole, stretching their necks to look inside. Now that he was moving again, they dispersed. This was a young man in a brown robe. Needless to say, his appearance was handsome. However, with the Grand Supreme Expert sitting under the moonlight flower tree in front of him, his appearance could not be considered extraordinary. At first, there was some hostility on his face, but he quickly suppressed it. He stepped to the edge of the hole, shook his robe, and smiled as if he didn't care. Dragon King is really omnipotent. I thought that the Grand Supreme Powerhouse should be as indifferent as the clouds since he cares about the world. But now that you're angry, I guess I was being rude. Pheasant turned around and looked at him coldly, saying in a deep voice, "My lord, this person is the one of unknown origins that I mentioned." After saying this, he cupped his hands to the man. "Where are you from, Your Excellency?" The man in the brown robe smiled. "Now people in the world have heard that the Dragon King has returned from the sea, and his cultivation has reached the Grand Supreme. Everyone is afraid of him. So seeing my appearance now, it shouldn't be difficult for you to figure out my origin, right?" Pheasant smiled. "With your current appearance, I still can't figure it out. First of all, maybe he is the messenger of the Golden Rock King. But after thinking about it, the Grand Supreme Rock King is also a hero. His messenger shouldn't be an arrogant fool. Then I guess it might be the beast spirit guarding the celestial sect. But now that the celestial sect has been destroyed, the beast spirit should be panicking like a stray dog. How dare it come here to make trouble? So I am very puzzled. Please explain it to me, Your Excellency." The group of demons laughed happily. But the man in the brown robe only had a cold face and said in a deep voice, "The Rock King is a hero? Does Your Excellency also want to dominate the world?" "Humph. I am the General Mo Yun under the Grand Supreme Rock King, the adopted son of the Rock King, and my title is Shining Night Lord." The group of demons suddenly stopped laughing, and the laughter stopped abruptly. Those who were a little closer to him also moved slightly away. They seemed to realize that the attitude of the Rock King's messenger meant that the relationship between the two Grand Supreme Powerhouses in the world was not very harmonious. These little demons, and even the Demon King, didn't want to be involved in it. At least not now. Pheasant was stunned and speechless for a moment. It was not that he was frightened by his power and reputation, but it was not good to say anything before he knew His Excellency's attitude. At this time, the place was silent, and the Shining Night Lord smiled. But he heard Li Yunxin say, "Oh." Slightly tilting his head to look at him, he said, "Shining Night. Is it the shining night that is sweet, warm, and non-toxic as mentioned in the medical books?" The pheasant suddenly remembered what Li Yunxin had said to him 2 days ago. "I should learn more from old Lu." So he immediately said, "My Excellency, what is that? I have never heard of it." Li Yunxin smiled. "It is commonly known as a sparrow." First, a demon couldn't help but laugh. Then a few more people snickered. Then, the low laughter that was like a breeze became continuous. The Shining Night Lord's face darkened. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Li Yunxin say again, "Little sparrow, let me ask you, what does your Rock King want to do by calling you here?" Before the snickering that was like a breeze stopped, it became a roar of laughter again because of this little sparrow. This name was the same as that thing, and lifeblood. In the northern land, it specifically referred to something on a man's body. The Shining Night Lord took a deep breath and finally sneered. The Dragon King claims that he is a saint who forgets about love. He also says that the saint is heartless and treats the common people like dogs. Now he doesn't look like a saint, but like the person you said he loves. The Dragon King himself is like this, but he is still preaching here. Is he teaching the true method or the evil method? Li Yunxin said. "Oh, since you don't want to say it for now, I will continue. Pheasant, let me tell you now. Other than the 4 situations of heartless heaven and earth, heartless saint love, and too low to love, there is another situation. This is the supreme benevolence. He ignored the shining Night Lord and began to preach again. Thus the demons quieted down. The shining Night Lord's lips moved as if he wanted to speak again. But in the end, he realized that this Li Yunxin was strong, and his tongue was even stronger. He temporarily restrained his temper, sneered in his heart, and stood still. No one can reach the realm of heartless heaven and earth. The realm of heartless saints is not something that can be obtained through pursuit. The saint is broad-minded and will not be biased because of his own likes and dislikes. If one tries to do this realm, he is no longer a saint. Since he has desires in his heart, he will eventually have his own likes and dislikes. He will not truly treat the world as the public. However, such people can be considered moral models in the world and can't be blamed. There are indeed very few people who do not do it for their own likes and dislikes. They only seek benefits for others. However, such people's cultivation realm is limited, and they have not seen the whole world. It is difficult to say whether they will be consistent or change their temperament in the future. There are only two people in the world who truly have the cultivation of the Grand Supreme. I don't know if the Rock Lord is in the realm of heartless, but I know that I am not. I have likes and dislikes and selfish desires. Such people are broad-minded because of their selfish desires, and have the ability to truly broad-minded. This is the supreme benevolence. Today, I will talk to you about the supreme Tao, Li Yunxin side. But if you want to talk about this, you have to first clarify the guest's intentions. Night Illuminating Lord, why did the Rock King call you here? The Night Illuminating Lord smiled. The Dragon King should know very well. As the saying goes, there cannot be two tigers in one mountain. I heard that the Dragon King went to the ocean. My Rock King thought that since he is the ruler of Midland, he should give the ocean to you. Since then, we have been living in peace, and there have been fewer unnecessary conflicts. But now, the Dragon King has returned to the land and gathered the demons to build a city here. May I be so bold as to ask the Dragon King, what does this mean? It was quiet all around. Li Yunxin only smiled. Since the Supreme Tao is broad-minded and broad-minded, it should find a place for the people in the world. Since I have my own likes and dislikes, I will also find a place for the people around me. This way city is the place for the people around me. As for the building of the city, it is the good karma of the demons and mortals here. They are enjoying themselves in this city, which is also my good karma. Your Rock King is the Grand Supreme, he should know this. Go and ask him. The Night Illuminating Lord snorted noncommittally, then sneered. So apart from this city, the Dragon King has supported the human emperor to suppress the Demon King, trying to dominate Midland. How do you explain this? Chapter 807. The smile on Li Yunxin's face disappeared. The demons also quieted down, asking for an explanation from a Grand Supreme expert, especially one who was known for his bad temper, was not something that everyone could do. Amidst the silence, 3 demons slowly walked out and stood behind the Night Illuminating Lord. Obviously they were his attendants. Then Li Yunxin said, "Pheasant." "Yes, sir." "Remove his head." The pheasant responded and walked away. The Night Illuminating Lord sneered and stared at the chicken demon, who hadn't reached the true realm. "You." But as soon as he said that, he suddenly realized that his feet seemed to have grown roots. Not only were his feet rooted and unable to move, but even the demon power in his body was stagnant. Li Yunxin had used a divine ability to freeze him and the people around him. Pheasant walked to him in 15 steps. The Night Illuminating Lord was calm in the face of danger. He only looked at Li Yunxin. He knew that if he was an ordinary demon king without any backing, not to mention the profound realm, even if he was at the peak of the profound realm, Li Yunxin would dare to kill him. But he was the Rock King's adopted son. Unlike the false saints of the Mystic Gate, the Rock King was a true Grand Supreme. Li Yunxin, who was known for his viciousness and resourcefulness, wouldn't kill him now, because it would mean starting a war with another Grand Supreme expert on the continent, and there would be no turning back. Using a divine ability and revealing killing intent as a Grand Supreme expert was enough to intimidate many people. But not him. So he snorted and stared at Pheasant's eyes. Doing this on this occasion, a dagger pierced his neck. It went in from the right and came out from the left, cutting his trachea and interrupting what he was about to say. Such an injury was fatal for mortals, but it was only a minor one for demons. Although the Night Illuminating Lord couldn't speak, he sneered again. If they really wanted to kill him, they could just cut off his head. Such behavior meant that they didn't dare to kill him. Pheasant pulled out the dagger. The Night Illuminating Lord squeezed his broken vocal cords with the powerful muscles of his neck and said in a hoarse voice, "Humph." There was no need to put on such an act. In the end, the shameless one. However, Pheasant kicked his knee. Since this profound realm expert didn't have any demon power to protect himself, no matter how strong his body was, he couldn't withstand the force. Before he could finish his words, he fell to his knees. The chicken spirit grabbed his hair bun and lifted it up, lifting his face and exposing his neck. "Your Excellency, you misunderstand," the demon said calmly. "If I kill you too quickly, his lord won't be happy. Also, this is the first time I've killed a profound realm demon king. I really want to make this interesting moment last a little longer." Without waiting for Zhao Yajun to make another sound, he cut open half of his neck. Only now did the profound realm demon's heart fill with fear. But he could no longer make a sound. Soon the pheasant made the second strike. However, the great Fae's body was tough. Even if one used a knife to cut their flesh, it would be like cutting wood. The pheasant had to use a saw to cut it 3 or 4 times before the cervical vertebrae could be seen. The demon blood quickly soaked Yijun's chest and dyed the grass beneath him red. Fear finally appeared in his eyes, and his eyeballs rolled around frantically. However, his body was already imprisoned. He couldn't even struggle. At this moment, one of the 3 people behind him in a blue robe finally spoke. He said in a deep voice, "Dragon King, please let him stay. I was rude and did something stupid." The pheasant was competing with a section of Zhao Yajun's cervical vertebrae. This demon's muscles were tough, and his bones were even tougher. He used 5 strikes, but only managed to leave a white mark on the bone. He had no choice but to pry it apart. The thin knife stabbed into the joint of the 2 cervical vertebrae. It was like stabbing into 2 pieces of steel. He could only pry it apart with difficulty. Hearing the blue-robed man's words, the pheasant looked up at Li Yunxin. But his lord didn't seem to have any intention of telling him to stop. So he wiped his hands on his robe, which were already slippery with demon blood, and began to try again. "I knew you were the one in charge." Li Yunxin leaned against the back of the chair. "I wanted to see how long you could keep up the act. Unfortunately, he's useless and his words are unpleasant. You should learn this from the pheasant." The blue-robed man glanced at Zhao Yajun. He took a deep breath. "I wanted to use this brother to test Dragon King's patience and attitude. But I made a mistake. He is indeed Rock King's adopted son." "Please, Dragon King," Li Yunxin laughed. "Since you said he is your brother, you should be Rock King's adopted son. Then Rock King still has a son and a daughter. Don't worry." There was a cracking sound. Zhao Yajun's cervical vertebrae were cut open. His body trembled slightly, and the fear in his eyes disappeared. The pheasant heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly cut open the flesh on the back of his neck. He held up the demon's head and asked, "My lord, do you want him to hold this head too?" This him referred to the remnant soul standing on Zhao Yajun's headless body. Li Yunxin shook his head and waved his hand. Zhao Yajun's remnant soul was twisted by an invisible force, twisted into a brown sparrow, and was sucked over. "It won't look good for Rock King to walk around on land." He teased the sparrow on his finger and said, "Give him some face." "Yes." The pheasant put away the dagger and threw Zhao Yajun's head to the ground. He used true fire to burn off the blood on his body and walked back to Li Yunxin's side. The blue-robed man looked at Zhao Yajun's corpse and then at Li Yunxin. His face was extremely gloomy. "You killed him. I also refined his soul." "Smile," Li Yunxin said. "The last person who spoke to me with this expression had his corpse next to you. It was you who drove him to his death. You wanted him to see how much I could tolerate you because of my fear of Rock King. Now let me tell you, there is no such thing as tolerance in the supreme benevolence. Li Yunxin teased the gray sparrow on his finger and said calmly, I want humans and demons to coexist peacefully for the sake of the world. I don't want humans to dominate Midland, nor do I want demons to bring chaos to the world. I want you to live together peacefully and create a beautiful environment for the people I care about. For this purpose, I can be heartless at many times. The only difference between this and those who talk about benevolence, righteousness, and morality, but are actually thieves and prostitutes is my heart. Because of my current level of Grand Supreme, I will not accept anyone's doubts. And because of this heart, he will die today and you will live. If I have to describe my supreme benevolence in one sentence, it is, for great benevolence, I am not afraid of small evils, and I know my own good. Bring his corpse back. Tell your rock king that I didn't come to this land to fight for hegemony, but don't force me to do so. I don't want to be his enemy, not because I can tolerate him, but because the demon race led by a king is more suitable to exist in this world. But the premise is that this king does not get in my way. After saying this, he looked at the blue-robed man. By the way, who are you? The blue-robed man slowly raised the corner of his mouth. However, his eyes were so gloomy that they seemed to be dripping water. King Rock's General Fu Yao. King Rock's adopted son. His title is Lord of Clouds. Okay. Then, do you want to continue listening or leave immediately? Dragon King's method is profound. I don't have the fortune to enjoy it. I want to return immediately to report. Then go. Li Yunxin waved his hand. A gust of demonic wind suddenly rose from the ground, rolled up the 3 stiff people and a corpse, danced in the air, and threw them out of the city. Thus, the place quieted down again. The moonlight was already blooming, and the fragrance of the flowers was getting stronger and stronger, even covering the smell of blood on the grass. The demons were silent. In fact, some of them wanted to leave immediately. It was not a wise move to participate in the battle between 2 Grand Supreme experts. However, that Grand Supreme was far away, while this Grand Supreme was right in front of them. They did not dare to leave. Li Yunxin was silent for a while, and said, I didn't kill to establish my authority in front of you. I just wanted to let you know that the difference between benevolence and inhumanity is only a matter of a thought. In the past, the Mystic Gate oppressed you and was eliminated. However, the Mystic Gate oppressed you and the mortals of the world. In the past, you had no fixed residence, and some people ate raw meat and drank blood. They envied the luxurious clothes and delicacies of the human world. However, these things were rare after all, and they wanted to kill and snatch them. However, demons do not produce, and humans create everything that you like. If you want to be happy for a moment for the small benefits in front of you, you will be killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. Some of you have already felt what I said, but some haven't. Li Yunxin looked up at the warm sun above his head. Then I'll make it simpler. In the heavens beyond the heavens where I originally lived, almost everyone, as long as they wanted, had the ability to fly in the sky and burrow into the earth. They controlled the steel beasts to gallop on the battlefield, and massacred cities thousands of miles away. Many great demons also have this kind of power. However, in that world, there are far more than millions of people who have this kind of power. The demons widened their eyes and began to whisper. If it was a normal cultivator or demon who said such an inconceivable thing, they would definitely be laughed at. However, coming from the mouth of this Grand Supreme Expert, there was no one who didn't believe it, because he himself was the best proof. Perhaps it was precisely because he came from there that he was able to reach the Grand Supreme Realm in less than a year. Li Yunxin waited for them to whisper for a while, then continued. In that world, the material wealth is unimaginable to the people of this world, even the monarchs of the human world. The things that you want are almost at your fingertips there. However, that world was also created by humans. Now, I want this world to become like the heavens beyond the heavens in the future. It's not for you, but for the people that I care about. However, this matter is related to you. If you become enemies with others and cause this world to be in constant turmoil, that kind of scene will be very difficult to come true. If you listen to my advice, settle down in this world properly, and cooperate with others, that kind of scene will come faster, and you can also get a share of it. Therefore, I protect the city of Wei. Some of you already know the benefits of getting along with others, so that you can recuperate. Since you have come to listen to my speech today, it is a blessing. Shanji will teach you the method of cultivation, so that you can also cultivate like the cultivators of the Xianmen in the past. He said a lot of things, but none of them made the demons so excited, so they whispered to each other, overflowing with joy. Then they heard Li Yunxin said again, "It's already noon. I gave them the whole morning." Shanji, which ones didn't come? There was a slight commotion among the demons. Some began to whisper, and some began to use talismans, obviously calling for friends. Shanji understood Li Yunxin's intention, so he waited for them for a while. After a while, many demons jumped out from the sky and the streets. The timid ones squeezed into the crowd and sat down obediently. The bold ones kowtowed to Li Yunxin, asking for forgiveness. Li Yunxin looked at them calmly and only nodded. So a quarter of an hour passed. Pheasant said, "My lord, for out of the 6 untamed ones from before have come." "Yes," Li Yunxin said. "One is still in the nest. The other is on the way, but it's too late." After saying this, he raised his hand and grabbed in the void. There was something in his hand. It was a furry cushion with black spots on a white base. The cushion was squarish, and the fur looked extremely smooth. He got up and placed the cushion on the chair, then sat down and sighed comfortably. "You have a good coat of fur." He raised his hand again, and there was a long whip in his palm. This whip was not made of braided whips, but pieces of white vertebrae. The treasure light on it was warm, and when it danced, there seemed to be a sharp sound. He threw the whip to Shanji. "Keep it. Use it for self-defense." Shanji received it. "Thank you, master." The demons did not even dare to breathe loudly. The 6 arrogant demon kings that Shanji spoke of were somewhat famous in this area. There were indeed 4 of them. 2 of them arrived earlier, and the other 2 had just arrived, and had been wandering outside the city. As for the rest, one was the leopard king with black spots on a white background. The other was the snake king with 2 horns on his forehead. Both of them had the cultivation of true state, and in this era where the great demons were dying, they were considered heroes. But even such a great character was stripped of its fur and turned into a cushion by the Dragon King. Then, it was turned into a magic weapon by the Dragon King. It was not that they did not know how powerful the Grand Supreme was. It was only now that they realized that he was so powerful that it was beyond the limits of their imagination. But it was not over yet. Shanji continued. Other than these 2, there are 13 people above the transcendent state. 22 people below the transcendent state. Li Yunxin stood up. "Leave these to them. Those who came with their heads, teach them the water cloud force. The rest of you teach them this." He tossed a scroll of the Ling Su sword sect's basic cultivation method to Shanji, and walked back to the Dragon King temple. Shanji received the scroll and turned around. Before he could say anything, a dozen or so quick-witted people had already flown up and shot out of the city. The rest of them were still in a daze. But when they heard Shanji's words, "By the Dragon King's order, we will be rewarded for killing the traitors," they came to a sudden realization and swarmed out. Soon, the grassland became empty again. Shanji stood in front of the Dragon King temple and thought for a while. He looked at the whip in his hand and turned around. The temple door was unlatched, but he did not dare to peek inside. He hesitated for a while and knocked 3 times. "Master, there is something I don't understand." "Come in." Shanji entered the door of the Dragon King temple for the first time. There was a small courtyard with a few thin bamboos on the left and right sides, and the front hall of the Dragon King temple was right in front of him. The incense burner table and the prayer mat were still there, but there was no statue or portrait on the incense burner table, only emptiness. Shanji walked through the hall and came to the backyard. He saw a path with strange rocks and a shallow duckweed pond. The courtyard was covered with fluffy green grass, and there was a stone table and 4 stone stools. The scenery was very elegant, obviously carefully designed. It would be very romantic to warm wine and watch the rain and snow in the courtyard on a snowy or rainy day. Shanji thought so. he saw Li Yunxin sitting on a strange rock by the shallow pond. The lotus in the pond had a stem, but did not bloom. The bottom of the pond was covered with pebbles, and was very clear. He was throwing fish into the clear pond. They were the kind of red koi as thick as a finger. He pinched his fingers and squeezed them out of the void. He loosened his fingers, and the fish entered the water and swam freely. Soon he realized that they were not ordinary koi, because each of them had a demon aura, and they were all different. It should be a demon with a different true form. But Li Yunxin had captured it, and made it into a koi. And he was very familiar with some of the demon aura. Demons that were not restrained around the city of Wei, and did not attend the meeting this time. He was stunned. Didn't His Majesty ask those people to catch them? Li Yunxin threw a total of 13 tails into the pond, and then rubbed his hands. They ran far away. Maybe they are hard to catch. Let me help you. Tell me, what do you not understand? Sit down. The pheasant looked around, took 2 steps forward, and sat down on the bench. Li Yunxin also got up from the strange rock, and sat beside him. He did nothing but looked at him seriously and gently, as if he valued him, and cared about his opinion. The pheasant was flattered. He hurriedly cleared his throat. His Majesty, I don't understand. I don't mean to boost others' morale. But why did we kill the Lord of the Night? In this way, the Golden Rock may be annoyed. I know His Majesty has a way to deal with him, but once something happens, it will hinder you from saving old Lu and the 9th young master. Li Yunxin laughed. You said you don't understand, but you didn't hesitate when you did it. That was His Majesty's order. Of course I didn't hesitate. Well. Li Yunxin thought for a while. Actually, it was to save them. When I came to the city of Wei from the East Sea, I asked many demons where the 4th Lord Lu was. But he was different from the 5th Lord and the 9th Lord. He didn't have a fixed residence. He had a temporary imperial residence with him, and he usually wandered in his fief. So the demons I asked were also not clear. Most of the demons under the Cloud Mountain who were friends with him were dead. If I want to find him myself, it will take a lot of effort. Because both Old Lu and the 9th Lord Lu are in his body, he should soon realize that he can refine the dragon soul of the 9th Lord for his own use. Old Lu's cultivation is high, but since he is a soul in someone else's body, even if he can't be refined, he can't do anything. So I don't have time to look for him slowly. I have to find a faster way. Now we have some power and information channels. I was going to ask you to help. But when I saw the Night Lord, I changed my mind. Think about it, why is that? Pheasant's expression became solemn. He thought for a while, and his eyes lit up. I understand, he said. Before I saw the Night Lord, I thought that the forces under the Golden Rock should have joined the Shinryu after being sealed for so many years. Even if he's alive now, the demons in the world are dying, and there shouldn't be anything useful. But the Night Lord is actually in the mysterious realm, and the Cloud Lord is also in the mysterious realm. In the past, the number of profound realm demons in the world was well known, but I've never mentioned the names of these two. This means that, when the Golden Rock was sealed, the people under his command were already prepared and hidden. In fact, their forces were not greatly damaged. Now that they have come out again, they immediately have a powerful force. Li Yunxin smiled. So we have to kill him. Pheasant immediately said. Because killing him made the Golden Rock angry. Once he is angry, he wants to deal with you. But no one can predict the outcome of the battle between the Taishang. He doesn't want a fierce battle to happen as soon as he comes out, and gives others an opportunity. So, he only wants you to submit, or to drive you out of Midland. The best way is to threaten you. Ah, Master, no wonder you repeatedly told the Cloud Lord. For the people you care about. Pheasant clapped his hands. Wonderful. In this way, the Rock Lord will really find the people you care about, Old Lu and Little Nine. It will be difficult for us to find the Lu Lord, but the Golden Rock has many subordinates, and it will be much faster than us. But the Golden Rock may not know about the immortal dragon soul. He must know. Li Yunxin said with a smile. Back then, he and the Art Saint tricked Shinryu. The Art Saint asked Shinryu to separate the dragon soul to seal him. Then he could possess Shinryu and go to the Netherworld. Pheasant said sincerely, "Master is wise. The golden rock will definitely be fooled." Li Yunxin smiled. "Is there anything else?" Pheasant hesitated for a while and wanted to say something. Li Yunxin thought for a while. "Do you want to ask about Qiao Jiesin? I just saw that the Qiao mansion is gone. It's an illusion. Once people leave, they will naturally disappear." Li Yunxin got up and walked to a few thin bamboos by the wall. He seemed to feel that the bamboos were sparse now, so he raised his hand and pulled in the void. As a result, a few new bamboos grew out, which indeed made this cluster of bamboos more sparse. "She is afraid. She doesn't want to stay in this world. So I found another place for her to go." Pheasant responded with an "oh." He seemed to be slightly relieved, but also a bit disappointed. He sighed and said, "So did Red Lady go to the same place?" Li Yunxin remained silent for a long while, then looked at him and said, "You really know how to make trouble for me." Pheasant paused. "Ah, go. Li Yunxin waved his hand and said, "Don't bother me. I'll call you if I need anything. Go out, be a spirit creature king, and spread your magic." Pheasant realized that he had asked something he shouldn't have asked, and this should be related to some fate and fruit. Although he couldn't understand it himself, he had heard about it. Some things were better left unmentioned. Once he mentioned it, he couldn't pretend that it didn't exist anymore. He hurriedly lowered his head and trotted out of the temple of the Dragon King. Li Yunxin stared blankly for a while in the courtyard, which was now peaceful again. She sighed. He was a grand elder now, and there was nothing to be afraid of in the Midland. But what he didn't dare to touch and didn't know what to do was not in the outside world, but in his heart. The soul of Red Lady, a ghost cultivator, was hooked by his impermanence lock and had been in his sleeve all the time. He didn't know what to do with her. In the past, Li Yunxin, or even half a month ago, Li Yunxin would not be afraid to this extent, because at that time, he didn't know how powerful the power of fate was. Chapter 808. The River of Fate. The river of fate that he could only pry into after he became a Grand Supreme, flowed slowly with an irresistible trend. But it did not flow in any specific direction, future or past. Its flow was a kind of trend, a trend that kept moving forward. Everyone's fate was driven forward by this trend. In a sense, fate was fixed, and it was called fate, because when one stood in the present and looked into the distance of the trend, one would realize that the development of fate would eventually touch some people and things. This trend was slow and powerful, and mortals had almost no ability to change it. If they did not know their fate, they would be greeted with surprise or fear one after another. If they knew, they could only sigh in vain and say, "Fate is predestined," after trying hard. However, a strong person like Li Yunxin, after prying into the flow of fate, realized that it was not impossible to change it, but it required too much power. To tie the flow of one's fate to others, a tributary might not be enough to change one's fate, but when there were enough tributaries, and they were strong enough, the terrible trend would eventually slowly change direction. Because of this, he also knew that once this direction changed, it would require an equally difficult process to change it again. That was why he felt scared and carefully distanced himself from all the tributaries that might cause adverse effects, so that he could see the current direction of his fate. For example, a weak and powerless person, riding a wild beast with endless brute force, had to do everything possible to control it to make it pass through a small door thousands of meters away. Behind that door was the result he wanted. Among the many powerful tributaries that affected his fate, Red Lady's one had long been entangled with him. He had wanted to completely separate himself from her, when he did not know the horror of fate, and had not seen the torrent. Now he was glad that he did not do that. If he had really done that, he was afraid that he would not be able to separate himself from her, and his future would become uncontrollable. The tributary of fate of this persistent ghost cultivator was unusually violent, like a surging river in a deep ravine. Every time there was love and hate, it made the river flow even more rapidly. The ghost cultivator's obsession made it unpredictable, becoming a terrifying and uncontrollable factor. He originally only treated her as a tool to achieve his goal. Not long ago, when his heart throbbed, He didn't know if it was because of a self-sacrificing tool, or because of a person. He was eager to get rid of the feeling that overwhelmed him, so he decided to end it in Punglai. He wanted to reconstruct a powerful netherworld body for Red Lady, so that she could completely get rid of the threat of being devoured by the dragon soul. When he had repaid her, he could tell her, "There is no need for you to choose me." However, he soon realized that it was not a good idea after becoming a Grand Supreme. Red Madam, who was originally a fish demon, had become a ghost cultivator. Later on, this ghost cultivator with an obsession fused with the dragon soul, and his obsession became even stronger. And now this ghost cultivator had died. If he helped her condense the body of the netherworld, she would become a ghost cultivator among ghost cultivators. That meant that her obsession would be 10 times stronger than it was now, 100 times stronger, and it would bind his fate tightly. There were many people who yearned for this kind of confinement, such as men and women who were passionately in love. The fate of the two people was tied to each other, and could not be separated, which meant that they would be closely connected for the rest of their lives, good or bad. But Li Yunxin knew from the beginning that this kind of binding caused by the obsession of ghost cultivators was not a normal state. The existence of ghost cultivators in the world was actually very similar to a big dream. In the dream, they might also have a keen perception and clear insight. However, their thoughts would also be out of control, and they would be obsessed with something or someone for no reason. A mortal who had a loved one or other half might completely forget that person in the dream, and give unreserved love to another person who appeared in the dream. But once he woke up from the dream, he would feel incredible about the decisions and experiences he made in the dream. Li Yunxin felt that until now, he still didn't know what kind of feelings he had for Red Lady. But even if he knew, he would never open his heart when she was in such a state of obsession. Because from a secular point of view, it meant taking advantage of a person's perilous state. It was no different from those lowly people who drugged and poisoned people in exchange for a chance to get intimate with someone. He wanted to give fate a chance. He wanted to give Red Lady a chance. If he was braver, he would also give himself a chance, although he didn't know whether he wanted it or not. He wanted to resurrect her. Resurrection in a real sense. It was not difficult for him to die first, and then come back to life to retain his sanity. When his realm was low, he did it once in the city of Wei. But if a person died first, there was no protection measure, and only a remnant soul was left. It was extremely difficult to make up the remnant soul. He didn't know if anyone had done it before, but he wanted to try. So Li Yunxin sighed and took a step. He appeared beside Dongting. Dongting also returned to spring. The snow and ice melted, and it became vast again. This place was once beyond recognition because of a blow from Kuan Wuzi. After that, it was poisoned by the cultivators who chased after Xianmen. It was almost a dead place. As for the surrounding Whitewater town and Egret Island, there were no people, and the place was full of withered grass. He walked along the lake, which became muddy because of the melting snow for a while, and slowly recognized some places where he had been. Looking up to the distance, he saw that Mount June was also half shorter. The beautiful and tall mountain was half collapsed by the lightning strike that day. Now it looked like Tortoise Mountain. Red Lady used to die in this area. He tried to find her lost things from here. Part of the souls of humans and monsters merged with the physical body. It should stay in the physical body. When the female monster died, the original physical body should have decayed. But decay and dissipation did not disappear completely. Instead, it should be integrated into this world. Was it possible to find those scattered things again? If he could do it, he would find the physical body again. He felt that he was slowly getting some clues. So he sat down cross-legged on a rock by the lake. Bai Yunxin didn't walk as fast as him, but it was time to return to Golden Rock after a few days. She would tell the Grand Supreme King Rock everything she had seen, so that he would know that he was now the Grand Supreme of the Netherworld. The Grand Supreme realm condensed by the body of the Netherworld didn't look unusual on the Midland now. This was because what Li Yunxin had done along the way was extremely insignificant for the magnificent power of the Netherworld in his body. But if he really fought with a strong man like Golden Rock, he would have to use a huge amount of power. Maybe the two of them would win or lose at first. But if it dragged on for a long time, Golden Rock could replenish himself with the Reiki of heaven and earth, but he could only rely on his own power. It should be a situation where he would definitely lose. However, this situation only existed in theory. If the fight between the top strong men like them really dragged to the point where Li Yunxin was defeated, because of the exhaustion of the power of the netherworld in his body, the Midland would almost be destroyed. It would be a situation where mountains and rivers would flow, lava would boil, and no living creatures would exist in the world. For Golden Rock, this situation was no different from losing. But no matter what, Golden Rock should have realized that Li Yunxin would not stay on the Midland for long. He would run to the netherworld like Chen Zhao did. So the battle of destruction would not happen. He would still ask people to find LV Jun. But that was only because Li Yunxin had disrespected him based on what Yi Jun had done. He had to give all the demons in the world an explanation. Therefore, these days Li Yunxin had to wait in the city of Wei. Because of this, he had the carefree time to think about Red Lady's matter. He held his breath and tried to look at the river of fate of the Banshee. This time, he looked up against the current and tried to find traces of her past. It went off without a hitch. For example, the channel of her previous river of fate had all dried up, leaving some rotten things to settle down below. That should be what she had lost. With a thought, Li Yunxin used his supernatural power to pick up the fragments from all over the lake and the surrounding world. Starting at noon and ending at moonrise, he had already collected all the fragments. The remnant soul of the Banshee was sleeping in his sleeve. He tried to piece the fragments together with the remnant soul. It really did match. Everything seemed easy and perfect. But Li Yunxin sat quietly for a while and frowned. He instinctively sensed that something was wrong. As for the reason, he could not think of it. He could not even make a guess. He felt that something was missing. But what was missing seemed to be something he could not understand. This made him slightly excited. He realized that if he could figure this out, he might be able to open up a new world that he could only see after reaching the Grand Supreme level. He tried to trace the river of fate of Red Lady again, but he did not find anything. So he tried to look to the side. As mentioned, the river of fate was just an example. This river was actually some kind of trend. But what was beyond the trend? What was there other than deep silence? He only tried for a moment before he suddenly felt his vision go black, and his 5 senses cut off. Even the thought of panic faded from his heart. His consciousness seemed to have escaped into a void, but it also seemed like it was gradually merging with the void. But he still could not feel any panic or fear in his heart. But a voice suddenly sounded. "Come back. Don't do anything stupid." The voice was like a clap of thunder, suddenly waking him up. With just a thought, the void suddenly retreated and disappeared without a trace. Li Yunxin's eyes widened. It was not because of the sudden voice, but because of the feeling just now. The Grand Supreme level was almost lost. What the hell is that? He then realized that the sun had already set. How many days had passed? Then he saw the owner of the voice. It was an old acquaintance, but he had not seen him for a long time. Chapter 809. If I didn't come at the right time, you wouldn't have been able to come back after a long delay. You just didn't let me feel at ease. Bai Yanjun held his tongue, and his originally slender eyes widened. He stared at Li Yunxin for a while, and then heaved a sigh of relief. That's good, that's good. What if something went wrong? Don't look there again. Li Yunxin reached out and touched his tongue. This action stunned Bai Yanjun. After a while he said angrily, "What are you doing?" "So it's true." Li Yunxin exhaled lightly. "I always thought it was fake. So it's true. Do you want to hang it outside?" "Ha. Okay. Little guy. Do you think you can be presumptuous now that you're in the Grand Supreme realm?" Bai Yanjun stared at him. "Do you know what stupid thing you've done?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while, and then laughed. "Let's not talk about what stupid thing I've done first. How long has it been?" "More than a day's work." "Fortunately, it's not that long." He raised his hand and rubbed his forehead. It was swollen and painful, as if he was tired from thinking too much. "How come you can run up again?" Bai Yanjun narrowed his eyes. Hey, did I disappoint you because I'm free? Li Yunxin jumped down from the big rock and stood up. He looked at him for a while, and then said with a smile, I'm not disappointed. I'm quite happy. We're old friends. Something happened down there again, and you're here to urge me to go? Bai Yanjun didn't appreciate his kindness, and laughed strangely. Ordinary people don't dare to call you friend. If you think that our friendship is not bad, why don't you do less stupid things so that I can feel at ease? I'm indeed free. I'm here. He paused for a moment. He thought for a while, and then said, forget it. I didn't want to tell you, but I owe you a favor. We had a hard time fighting the Nether Earth Mother in the Netherworld, and she had the upper hand and sealed the bottom. A few days ago, he broke through the restriction again, and sent some trash to the surface. It is a good thing that you cleaned up all those scum on the ocean, so we can breathe a sigh of relief. That's why I can come back. You've done yourself a good deed, and called me to save your life. Li Yunxin had completely broken free from the confusion caused by the feeling of emptiness from before. He took a few more steps to stretch his legs and feet before saying, I don't think they're random soldiers. If they were minions, how would you be relieved of your predicament, except for a bunch of minions? Let's not talk about this. Why have you come here? Bai Yanjun said, You've guessed correctly before. I'm here to hurry you up. Li Yunxin laughed and couldn't help but tease him. Rush me? Could it be that the netherworld can't move without me? I didn't expect that not only am I a big shot above ground, I am also a big shot below ground. Yan Jun, this shows that you had a good eye for investment. Did Chen Zhao give you any rewards? He had a good impression of this Yama Jun. Although this guy was sarcastic and mean, he didn't take advantage of him. He had something to ask of him, but he never hid it. He helped him achieve many great things and saved his life. Not to mention that this Yama Jun was not a villain. Even if he was a villain, he was really a villain. Dealing with such a person was much more comfortable than dealing with fake saints and Qingshui people. These days, he had the power of Taishang, and he suddenly became open-minded about many things. At first he felt relaxed, as if many heavy burdens had been lifted. But after these days, he gradually felt bored. From the fact that some things couldn't be open-minded and narrow-minded, it actually made him feel happy. After all, fighting with others was an endless joy. But now, other than the few people around him, the only people who could slightly interest him were those who were also members of the Taishang Club. It was really lonely at the top. He felt that his name was not Good Yunxin. High up in the sky, the heart was very lonely. If he had called himself something like Qingyan or Shanghai, it might have been much more interesting. However, when Bai Yanjun heard his words, he didn't argue with him. Instead, he paused and said, You guessed right. The great plan of the underworld can't be separated from you. Li Yunxin was taken aback by his sudden solemn and serious demeanor. After a while he said, You mean, the great calamity? Yes. Li Yunxin shook his head and sighed. Then let me guess again. Are you still going to tell me that I'm important, and that you need me like you always did before? At the same time, you won't tell me what the great calamity is? The White Hell Lord laughed. No, I'm here to tell you. Li Yunxin was sincerely stunned. But before that, tell me what you wanted to do just now. Bai Yanjun held his tongue and asked, Why did you take it so hard? A smart person like Li Yunxin immediately realized that Bai Yanjun's two questions might mean that there was an important connection between the two, even if he couldn't imagine what kind of connection it was. Thereupon he honestly and seriously said, I want to resurrect Red Madam. I want to complete her remnant soul, and make her a human again, or a demon. So I went back to the River of Fate to find those scattered things. But after completing it, I always feel that something is missing. I don't think it's right. Bai Yanjun laughed strangely. You're a smart person. Don't you think it's strange that it's so easy to do this? Yes. Yama Jun shook his head. It's not your fault. I can't say that you're too smart for your own good. It's just that, it's not something you should spy on. Li Yunxin, let me ask you. Apart from that, do you realize that there's something strange about yourself and everyone in this world? He changed the topic again. But Li Yunxin also liked to do this when talking to people, so he didn't think much of it. Instead, he followed his train of thought and said, "There are too many strange things. Which one are you talking about?" Bai Yanjun smiled and raised his hand, slowly drawing a circle in front of him. Li Yunxin felt some kind of power, but he didn't sense any malice from this power, so he didn't dodge. Yama Jun put down his hand and stared straight at him. "Now look up at the sky." While the two were talking, the setting sun had already set behind the mountain. In early spring, the sky darkened quickly, and now the moon had risen in the east. Li Yunxin didn't know the profound meaning of looking up at the sky, but he still did as he was told. He could see a brilliant river of stars. It was hard for those who had never seen the river of stars in the sky, on a clear night, to imagine its magnificence. Countless stars twinkled in the sky, and the luster was not uniform. They had their own colors, purple or red, blue or yellow. Today's moon was also a full moon, and one could even clearly see the craters and radial stripes on it. There were endless mysteries above the sky. How many people looked up at the sky at night, guessing if it was the residence of the immortals? How magnificent it must be, and how many of them had given birth to? Li Yunxin's heart skipped a beat. He realized one thing. He had never had the thought of flying to the sky to find out what was going on. Even when Bai Yanjun taught him the method of possession that night, and when he discovered that the familiar Venus was missing in the starry sky, whether it was when he still didn't know how to fly, or when he had advanced to the transcendent state, and could dance in the sky with his supernatural powers, or now, until just now, when he had reached the grand supreme state, and could travel the four seas to his heart's content, he had never had such a thought. Fly to a very high altitude to take a look, or even fly out of the celestial sphere, and into the universe to take a look. This kind of thought was blocked. Just like the dragon son and the Lord Dongting, they turned a deaf ear to the possession of the dragons. He turned his face abruptly, and looked at Bai Yanjun in surprise. "You did it." "Yes." "Why?" The Yama King smiled. "Go and take a look and you'll know." Li Yunxin took a deep breath, and was silent for a while. He felt his fingertips tremble slightly. When he was still a mortal, he rarely felt so excited. Now that he had reached the grand supreme state, he felt that there was nothing in the world that could shock him. But he actually experienced a similar feeling again. He spent 3 breaths to calm himself down and said, "Okay." As soon as he said that, his body rose into the sky. His body was already at the grand supreme state, and it might be considered extremely powerful among the grand supreme states. He had no doubt that even if he went to the vacuum, the universe, or the moon or Mars, he could still stroll in the park. And the power of the netherworld in his body was abundant, enough to support him to fly infinitely far away. In fact, thinking about it now, the cultivators of the true state could do this. People or demons with low realms had to use the Reiki of heaven and earth when they were flying in the air, because their own chi was still abundant. If they only flew with their own strength, once the Reiki became thin at a very high place, they would be powerless. People above the true state didn't have to worry about this. But if they got the mysterious state, they might be able to ignore the harsh environment in the vacuum universe and stay a little longer. However, for so many years, no one wanted to do this. It was hard to imagine how those people below did it. He rose very fast, and Dongting soon became a shallow pool the size of a bowl. The air around him became dry and cold, but there was a fierce dipper wind. He felt that he should have reached the troposphere. If the atmospheric composition of this strange world was the same as that of his world. He didn't stop and continued to go up. The dipper wind gradually disappeared, and he could only feel cold. He should have reached the stratosphere. The boundary of the earth became an arc, and he could even see that it was still evening in the east. At this time, he felt that the world was even more vast. With his rapid rising momentum, he should have passed thousands of miles. But the starry sky above his head was still out of reach, and even the light and color had not changed. But it should be like this. Things on the ground could no longer be seen clearly. He turned his face to look around, and then his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He thought that the sky would change. In the east, it was still the sky at dusk. At this time, there should be dim light near the landmarks, and the sky above should be dark. But the sky in front of him was still densely covered with stars. It was very weird. But he couldn't tell why it was weird. He frowned slightly and took a deep breath. Bright light burst out around him. He went straight up for thousands of meters again. However, the sky still didn't change. An idea slowly came into his mind. Li Yunxin didn't want to fly up like this anymore. So he finally used his supernatural power. His figure flashed continuously, and every time he disappeared, he crossed a distance of 5 or 60 kilometers. After 20 times, he should have been more than 1,000 kilometers above the Earth. In his world, such a distance was the boundary of the atmosphere. Looking down, he could see the whole Earth. Li Yunxin slowly lowered his head at this extremely high place. He did see a whole pure heaven ball. It was like a marble, but more like an eyeball. That pupil was the midland. The midland was green, brown, and white. The part of the pupil that looked outward was the endless ocean around him. It was a deep blue. The white of the eye that looked outward was a white mist. That should be Ruoshui. The pure heaven ball, like an eyeball that had been dug out, stared straight at him, making him slightly shiver in this high sky, at the junction of the atmosphere and outer space. Because he didn't see the black curtain in the universe, and the endless deep space. Above his head, below his body, and even in the entire space that wrapped around this eyeball. It was still the sky that was densely covered with stars and shining silver. Even to the east of this eyeball, which should be only about 500 kilometers away from the ground, he saw a spot of light. That should be the sun, right? As for the moon, Li Yunxin turned around and found it. When he jumped with his supernatural power just now, he had already passed it. It was a flat cake, not a ball. Just like what people could see on the ground. This vast starry sky, it was just the background. It was like a huge piece of paper that was full of things and wrapped the entire pure heaven ball. And the night sky that he had seen before was all fake. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. But soon, he told himself to calm down. He tried, for the first time, to spread his spirit power to an infinite distance, trying to touch that paper that might exist. He touched it as soon as he tried. It was not thousands or tens of thousands of meters above his head. That paper seemed to have no distance. It was like he was already in that paper. It was also like the paper was not in a certain place in space, but existed in some magical place that couldn't be described with space. Li Yunxin tried to poke it, but as soon as he thought about it, he immediately felt a terrifying power. It couldn't even be described with power, but simply terrifying, destructive, and chaotic itself. But this feeling seemed to be just a tiny insignificant breath that came from the outside, that was blocked by this paper. But such a tiny breath was enough to temporarily stop the power of the netherworld in his body. He suddenly lost all the power of his supernatural power, and fell straight down. After falling for 4 or 5 breaths, he finally regained his breath. He turned around and saw that the moon was right under him. Li Yunxin's face turned pale. He forced himself to calm down and looked at the moon. It was an extremely thin layer of metal, decorated with patterns of craters and radial canyons. Not surprisingly, it was made of the same material as Penglion Dragon Island. He was in a daze for a while. In fact, it was a full quarter of an hour. For the first time in his life, he really couldn't think of anything in this quarter of an hour. Too many thoughts came and went, and he couldn't grasp any of them. Until Bai Yanjun appeared beside him out of nowhere, and said in a deep voice, "Did you feel it?" Li Yunxin took a deep breath, and then took another deep breath. "What is that?" "You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.